Okay.
I would have gathered.
Wow, and you're on.
And you're on.
The House will come to order. I'm sorry. Wrong place. Bad habits. Okay, we're going to get started with the November meeting of the CAC, otherwise known as the Fall Harvest Meeting. I'm Terrence Carroll, Maria Garcia Berry. We're your co-facilitators, and we'll be with you for the remainder of this evening.
Or the remainder of your life.
Really. We'll be here until my 70th birthday together. We're going to do introductions. We'll start to my right.
Paul Andrews, President and CEO of the National Western Stock Show.
Kayla Birdsong with the Grow House.
Liliana Flores Amaro, I live in Swansea.
Ann Hayes with Westfield Company.
Ann Elizabeth Globeville.
Michael Long with Riverside Cemetery.
Nancy Walsh with the Denver Museum of Nature and Science.
Hi, Trelaure Bauer, also with the Denver Museum of Nature and Science.
Patricia Carmody, Colorado Watershed Assembly.
Slavica Park with Focus Point Family Resource Center.
Mickey Zeppelin, Rhino, and Zeppelin Company.
Larry Burgess, Business Association.
Dave O'Loughlin together. Ted Pollett from Globeville neighborhood.
John Suffin from Globeville.
Betty Cram for Elyria, Swansea.
Jocelyn Hiddle with CSU.
Jim Garcia with Clinic at Tepeyac.
Hi, I'm Brad Dodson. I am, as of Monday, the Deputy Director of the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. Gretchen is on her way. She'll be here in just a few minutes.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Liz Adams Sierra, Associates.
Terrence introduced me, so we're going to the back.
Angelina Torres de Swansea. Gracias.
Angelina Torres from Swansea. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Be careful.
I'm not into college. I need what done.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Julie Skeen. I'm with CIG. I'm part of the placemaking team.
Jay Rinkins with MIG, also part of the placemaking team.
Eric Anderson, Design Manager for the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
Matt Uren, resident of Denver, who has a real interest in the rebuild of the Denver Western Complex.
Michael Sapp.
Michael Sapp, Mayor's Office of the National Western Center and North Denver Cornerstone Collaborative.
John Sampion. Oh, or you just waving? Oh,
Marcy Lochran with the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center.
thank you.
I was waiting for Julie.
Then he just walked in.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Lawrence Snyder. I haven't been here for quite a few months, but we own 18 acres, 2 blocks west of here.
Thank you everyone for being here tonight. It certainly is appreciated. The first thing on the agenda is that we have a wonderful thank you note from Betty Cram that I want to share with everyone. To my dear family and friends of the NWC-CAC and National Western Center, the celebration you gave me on the unveiling of my Betty Cram Drive on October 26th was so great and a day I will always remember. I am so honored and I feel like I am, I'm not really good at reading cursive anymore, am I? Oh, I feel like I am part of the greatest show on earth. And my new road leads right to the front door. Wow, exclamation point. Thank you again, Betty Cram.
All right. Okay.
Here, let's switch out.
I'm
going to go take care of this.
Okay. Tim, we're going to skip over Tim because he's not here yet. Tim will be here shortly. He was tied up in a meeting in the City and County building, and he will be back. So let's start going with partner updates. Do you want to do? And Gretchen just walked right in.
Timing couldn't be better. I think we need to turn down the volume, Liz, somewhere. Paul's surprised.
Oh, it really is my turn. Is this introductions or agenda? Oh, good. Partner updates. So to stall, I will pass around candy that I brought back from Elyria, Ohio, my hometown and the namesake of the Elyria neighborhood.
Is it really?
It is.
It is.
The
It's the
Elyria
last
neighborhood was
business.
platted by a gentleman from my hometown in the late 1800s. And honestly, it's one of the reasons I wanted to work on this project when I realized that someone from Elyria could be working on a project in Elyria. That's great. So a little known fact. So as I catch my breath, so Gretchen Hallra, Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. And the first thing I'd like to do, and Maria and Terrence, I don't know if you did this, but introduce Brad Dodson. Did that happen?
He introduced himself.
Well, I'd formally like to introduce Mr. Brad Dodson, who is joining the National Western Center office. And Brad and I have worked together for the last 5 years, and he's worked on a number of city redevelopment projects, has a city planning background like I do, also has an MBA, so he understands the finances, and cares passionately about community. And that's why I think he's a great fit for this work that we're doing here, and will bring a lot of value and skill, and he's just a great addition to our team. So that's my first announcement. I just couldn't be more thrilled. Secondly, I wanted to talk about a few, just for a minute each, about a few of the ongoing activities. I know that we're going to do more structured report outs on both baseline for our capital build and also around placemaking. But just to keep tabs on some of the other efforts coming out of the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center, we are continuing discussions on rail realignment. We will be moving a process through at the Surface Transportation Board to allow the program to rebuild and consolidate the Denver-Rock Island Railroad facilities. And we've continued to engage them on our designs, but that is the next step in our process is to go to the STB, the Surface Transportation Board. And you'll see us initiate some preliminary actions around that and really start that process in the next 2 months. Secondly, we do have, we had talked about this at a prior meeting, but a request for information out around energy providers that could be campus partners to the new authority. So the National Western Center office at the city is doing some work to help the new authority get a head start on some of its partnerships around energy. You'll see us do the same thing around telecom and advertising, also around food and beverage concessions. And the work that we'll be doing is really just to start to generate some market activity so that we can have teams and firms ready to talk with the future authority. The city won't be making those contracts, but as the authority forms, there are things that we need on the capital construction side to help us build correctly. So around energy, for example, should we be building for district energy or traditional energy systems? And one way to test that is to see if there's a market out there that wants us to help us deliver more sustainable energy systems, and then we can plan for that in the space on the campus, as an example. Also wanted to let you know that we presented last time and have been outreaching on our 1909 Stadium Arena study. We've had a couple of folks express interest in that. We are still working through the city's procurement process. So I would expect that work to really start in earnest in January, and I just wanted to let folks know they weren't missing anything. We're still working through the city's procurement process and outreaching for participants, and we'll be back on that in January with what our next steps are in really launching that work. And I did want to, we are still in process on another topic that has come up around 4701 Brighton, the old Elyria Town Hall. Not that I'm partial to that being from Elyria, but that was a use that was in that building. So we are still partnering with Historic Denver and History Colorado on the structural assessment. We don't have that result yet, but when we do, we will share that with all of you. We also, one idea I kicked around with our team was for any of the properties that are there, and I know that 4741 Brighton is a property that's also come up, that we would want to basically ask the CAC and the community if there are properties that are set to be removed, if folks would like to come on tour with us and identify any assets in those buildings or structures that we want to save and preserve and bring forward to the future campus. That we'd be willing to do that, and our team's ready to do that. I know there could be windows or other treatments and things that we want to preserve and bring forward and add some culture and history back to our campus. So we can follow up on that with the placemaking team and schedule those tours. And then we do have a couple of big procurements underway that we've been talking about. In process right now are procurements on horizontal design, rail design, and then we'll have one large procurement coming forward in January. Actually, it will be December 18th that we'll have an RFQ, a request for qualifications, around our first large contract for horizontal integrated construction, and looking for teams to come out with qualifications back to us, and then we'll go through our request for proposals process afterwards. It will take the first couple of months of 2018. It's a large dollar amount, so I wanted to make sure everyone wasn't surprised. It's $275 million worth of horizontal work. It's an integrated construction format, which means that one contractor basically serves to help coordinate that work, and work orders with all the specific projects are let underneath that over a period of 5 to 7 years. But it does structure us to be able to begin some of the really, moving from planning to delivery, which will be the theme of the presentation I'm going to deliver later on in this meeting on baseline budget and scope and schedule. And that was a lot. I think that is everything that I wanted to touch on. Thank you.
Rachel, did you talk about the jobs piece at all?
Oh, no.
Did you?
Are you going to do it later in your program update, or are you going to do it now?
No, so it would be a good idea to do a workforce. Yeah, no, and you missed, I was running in and they handed me the microphone, so I'm reading all my notes. So related to that horizontal integrated construction contract, and sometimes you'll hear me call it the HIC for short, we've been having a lot of engaged discussions with City Council and with our team, and also with a group called Work Now, essentially. It's a group of resource providers for workforce that are coming together and creating a common platform and shared database and common application form and outreach. And there's a lot of proposals behind that, and I think they're going to launch the Work Now platform officially, I think in the beginning of 2018. But we've been networking with those folks, talking to City Council about how do we put a socioeconomic lens on all of the targeted outreach and training for workforce that's going to happen with these big contracts, and really tying that to this first big contract that's going forward. So we're looking at that in 3 ways. The first is, and these are changes for the city and how we do procurements. The first is really looking at our interview and selection process and making sure that we're assigning points and value to the selection of a contractor based on their ability to deliver a workforce plan. And I think if we assign the value of points that we're talking about, which is if you were to say there were 100 points and we'd assign 10 to that, it becomes a real point of competition for these big firms to come forward with some real innovations from industry. And bring practices that some of these companies are using in other cities and bring them to Denver and make them part of how Denver does business, which is a part of what we want to do with National Western Center, is really pilot some innovations on how we outreach to community. So that would be the first, that we actually select firms based on their ability to do that work, not just on their price points and their delivery packages. The second would be that we would embed some of those workforce elements into their contract and make them accountable to it. And that's a lot of what the discussion has been, is what are those contractually required elements for outreach and performance and data back to the city on how successful they are. And then the third is that we've been talking to the partners about a financial contribution from the National Western Center program to this upcoming shared platform, so that we can really look at targeted training related to National Western Center contracts and targeted outreach and support services for folks that have different barriers to coming into the workforce or need upskill training to move from one job to another. And this is something that CDOT has done already. They've been working with this group of partners called Work Now, and it's something that we really need to do too, because one thing our program offers that CDOT does not is the vertical construction skills and trades as we move from our horizontal contracts to our vertical contracts and building structures. So it's a really big opportunity for us, for Denver, to do it right, because what the National Western Center program does really impacts the big programs that follow us, and that's the next GEO bond program that just passed, and then also our other 2C project on the convention center. So we get the honor of going first, and if we do this right, we set a precedent that actually makes a lot of progress in this area. So I want to thank Councilwoman Ortega. She's been a huge supporter of ours on this and really helping us get our ideas right. So we met after Thanksgiving right away on this 8/15.
So just to be clear, that will apply, what you just described.
Can you use the mic so everybody can hear?
So what you just described will apply to the $275 million contract that will be let.
Correct. Yeah, so that's for the horizontal integrated contract, and we will actually, for City Council, we're going to start these briefings, and then as we do, we'll brief the CAC too. We don't have our details figured out yet, and we will have, when we release an RFQ, just for so you understand our procurement process at the city, we usually attach a sample contract. So we've actually got our city attorneys working on language, and we'll have the language that progresses in detail from a request for qualifications to a request for proposals to actually negotiating a contract and then bringing that to City Council. So as we move through these steps, we'll get increasing amounts of information. Right now we're at the what are the big areas we should be focused on, and those are the 3 that we've started with. But yes, those are intended for this first big contract, because if you think about it, it really is nearly a third of the program moving forward, and we need to get this right now. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. First, could you elaborate a little bit more when you say they'll be required to do workforce development? How does that look like? What does that mean? Does that mean they'll take folks interested in those industries and provide them with the full training? Or does it mean just upskilling? That's the first question. Second is Work Now, fantastic organization, mostly focused on construction. Are you also going to be looking into workforce development for some other positions that will be available, and when will those be released? What those other opportunities might be? Thank you.
Yeah, those are great questions. For the first question, that's what we are still working on. So the details of what we are hoping for is when you see the language around a request for qualifications, that we will be seeking a workforce plan back from industry. So we've already been talking about some of the things we know we want industry to do. They outreach and train all the time. We want them to outreach and train in areas of greater need and with populations of greater need, where it might be a little harder for them to get there, and that's going to be the extra effort we make. We want them to put a socioeconomic lens on their outreach and training, but we're going to ask them for the plans, and then we're going to look at them all, and we might even borrow ideas across what industry provides, and then we'll be putting them into contract language. So my answer is you stay tuned, because we'll be coming back with this, and we're pretty hopeful. We know what we need at a minimum, but we want to get some pretty good ideas back. Other cities are doing this. Denver's just starting this, but we should be capturing what those ideas are. So I don't have that yet, but we should be seeing it when we get to the RFP, the proposal stage. And then one of the reasons that we really like Work Now, and we're still getting to know the program, it's been in development for 2 years. It's got a lot of resource partners attached to it, because they could work across different types of programs and jobs. And when we think about National Western Center, there's at least 3 broad categories of jobs, right? There's the construction jobs up front. There's all the jobs associated with operating a campus and keeping the stock show here for the next 100 years. So that's jobs that are on campus and running the facilities, and businesses on the facilities, businesses at the campus, small businesses included, and concessions possibilities. And that would be a discussion with the authority. You know, we need to build the right facilities, and the authority needs to bring the right vendors on. And then last is the pipeline, and this is the long-term vision, and we've talked about this here a couple of times around next generation agribusiness. So for folks that are interested in a STEM background and then a STEM job opportunity, that's the research and innovation around agriculture that CSU brings to the table and has really been the lead on with some of their work in innovation and agribusiness. So I like to think about it in 3 ways and over a much broader period of time than even just building the campus.
I have a couple of probably procurement questions, but I want to put another piece in what I'm going to call it economic development dynamic, not just the jobs targeting. Everything Gretchen just said is true about those particular types of jobs, but there is near-term things across the full arena that can happen that I think we've talked about quite a bit with the master planning and developing the local urban economy, cottage businesses, things that, markets, all kinds of things that be fast. So later we can talk a lot about that. And then there's intermediary STEM things that aren't necessarily once somebody gets motivated when they're 7 years old because of the National Western and gets their PhD at CSU down the road and comes back, So anyway, we can talk a lot about that. But the procurement question I have is, first of all, you mentioned that 1909, there's some interest, there's a couple of groups interested in 1909. I need to know what that means, because that's going to be quite a development process, and then I have a couple other questions.
So only that 2 CAC members have expressed interest to date, and that the team is...
in what?
In participating in the advisory groups.
Okay, that's what you didn't say. I thought you were talking about okay, so you might want to remind us of both those advisory groups. You might want to remind us.
Of what the advisory groups are?
There were 2 groups, right?
Yes, and I'll get the names wrong.
Okay.
And one is, the study is in 2 parts. Part of it is a structural assessment of the building.
Right.
Part of it is a market study to see how you make a viable business model that can sustain itself both with the public food market and what other uses you might need to incorporate to make sure that's sustainable and honestly affordable.
Cool. And then I wanted to formally support and publicly ask that the 4747, 4741, and 4747 duplex be put on the examination. I did make an initial gesture formally to do that, and I also feel like there's 2 buildings of that architecture only right near there, and it has been okay for demolition. And I understand from talking with some of the landmark people that it wouldn't necessarily be demolished until after the stock show, just for practical reasons. But I appreciate the tour idea, but I'd ask Denver to consider itself, since you own the property now, the city owns it, looking at that and saying, let's move that over to protect it if we can, if there's any way, for the sake of conversation until we fully assess what we can do with all those properties.
So I followed up with our team on this, and we've worked, touch base and worked closely with History Colorado as one of our MOU partners. There will be several structures they've let us know, and they've helped us, early start to establish some priorities. And their first priority was the 4701 buildings, and they said that at this meeting. That is one that really has the historic use and value, and that's the one that we're focused on right now. We do also need to look at structures on Baldwin Court and come up with a plan for what we want to move and how do we do that ahead of the actual demolition schedule. So I will follow up on that. I don't know that 4741 is one that History Colorado and Historic Denver have put as the highest priority, but I will commit that we are going to come back with a plan for what happens with these structures, and we will look to really partner with the historic community to prioritize the ones that we should be moving, and they add a huge amount of character and opportunity. And one of the opportunities is programming too, because we'll have some great big structures on there that will be programmed, but smaller groups need smaller buildings to program, and it just makes it a more accessible campus. So I will talk to our team. We've got a meeting coming up with History Colorado at a minimum on 4741. If you would like to go in there with us and help us preserve some of the pieces of it, and then we'll come back to you with a plan on the remaining structures.
So Gretchen, I can add to that.
Oh yeah, thanks. Oh, I didn't see Eric in the back.
So we have a consultant on our team, Needham Hunt, who has done, it's called the Class 2 historic survey of every building and parcel within the 250 acres. Okay, so we now have all, it's called a 1405 form or a 1403 form for all the buildings, all the property, including all the horizontal, like the rail corridors and the river edge. So all that is part of this assessment that they've done. Now that we have this information, we're going to come back and figure out the full strategy for all the historic buildings on the campus to see which ones can be reused, which ones are most important to save, which, however those all work out. So we're starting that probably next week, and then I hope to have an update for you guys at our next meeting on December 14th.
And John just walked in.
Hi, John. I know, Eric. Do you want to add anything to that or not?
I have no idea what to add.
Okay, fine.
Well, it's fair to say, AE had a specific question about 4741, is that correct? Brighton Boulevard?
Yeah, it's a duplex, yeah.
Right.
We did discuss it.
Okay.
It was given landmark qualifiers, and it's not to the exclusion of anything else. And I understand that, I'm sorry, I don't have a mic. I understand that I'm not at all in contention of prioritizing. I'd like the idea of saving the industrial building. I think that's just the one that people first spoke out about, and that's one of the reasons. And I think what I'm asking is that the cluster be scoped, and that we look at that cluster and evaluate it relative to that helping with the seam, using those buildings with the seam between National Western and onto Brighton. There's a commitment on the part of the project to make it neighborhood friendly. So I don't want there to be token buildings. I want us to look at every opportunity, not just financially. I'd like to do a will, where there's a will, there's a way. So I know I'm not ready to think about walking around that building to see what kind of parts on any of those buildings. I don't have the emotional, I'm not in that place. I would rather we give voice to what's there and look at it as a potential cluster. So, and I have talked to, there you are. We've talked about it and tried to.
Yes, and I know that we're trying to have that conversation. I know that we're having a meeting with Gretchen and with Eric that will be happening in December. Yep. With also the State Historic Preservation Office. I've reiterated many times about the fact that I know we're talking about placemaking and the site and authenticity for the site, and these buildings do have some opportunities for that authenticity of how we can combine this great project into the neighborhood and make that meld into the neighborhood instead of being a border between this project and the neighborhood. And so that will be part of the discussion, and we hope to have discussions about all of these buildings. There's a very real timeline on Brighton Boulevard, and that's why we're talking about 4701 with a State Historical Fund grant right now to figure out some of the structural issues on that one. But we're going to be having some other conversations, and I apologize for my tardiness.
No, you were right on time.
Okay.
And I do, and John, as you were walking in, there's also a huge programming opportunity, not just the architectural authenticity, but to bring in smaller groups into smaller buildings. And so that's part of when Eric talks about the strategy, that's what we want to not look at these buildings one by one. We want to look at them as a group and come up with, because it's about both what can we do, which buildings are the most important to move onto the campus, and then where do we move them? Because moving them across the BNSF line is a different feat. But just really thinking carefully about how to incorporate them into making this a real place.
Okay.
And it was the CAC and it was this conversation that highlighted the 4701 building, but History Colorado followed up, and Mark Rodman let me know that he couldn't be here tonight. But they said if you do nothing else, you have to address that building. But we're going to look at all of them as a more full strategy.
Great. John.
Well, let me see if I can say this in a way that will come out understandable. Are we safe to assume that every step will be taken to try to preserve, to preserve whatever historical aspect of the Elyria neighborhood can be preserved and incorporated. Can we have confidence in?
So you should have that confidence once we bring the strategy back to you, and then
Okay.
you'll tell us if you like it or not.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else for Gretchen before? She'll be back up, so this won't be your last shot at her.
And also Councilwoman Debbie Ortega has joined us. Thank you. Paul Andrews.
Paul Andrews.
So for me, it's all about the National Western Stock Show. We're 4 weeks away from the 112th version of the National Western. Won't that be fun? So we're closing all our final deals, so the panic that my staff and I are in right now, you all can help us with. Because I got to hire 600 people between now and January 1st. So please use your social media, please use your email marketing, anything and everyone you know that might come down here and work part-time for us, we need them. So please help us get there, because it's hard to hire 600 people in a market where 2.6% unemployment is. So great job, City Council, on keeping us here and the mayor, but hi guys, 2.6 is crazy.
Tell us where you want us to direct people. Do you have
Yes.
a website? Do you have something?
You bet, just nationalwestern.com, and you'll see the employment opportunities site. And we, depending on your skill level, these are some very well-paying part-time jobs. If you can run a loader, then you're going to be paid more than someone that can sweep the floor for us. So it just depends on your skill level. And number two, you'll be the first to know that CSU should be very proud of their president, CEO, and chancellor, because for the first time in the history of the Citizen of the West, we're sold out a month out of the show. And Tony Frank is this year's Citizen of the West, and I got to tell you, there must be no better man on the planet than Tony Frank, because he has sold out all the tables at the Citizen of the West Dinner. That's amazing. So congratulations to CIG. Congratulations to Tony. Yes, John?
What about people that don't have access to a computer? Can they physically?
You bet. I've got the employment office is open every day from 9 to 5 right here on site.
Okay.
Have them walk over here, John, and we'll sign them up. Thank you. Yep. Okay, thank you.
All right.
I'm not sure if I brought this up last year or maybe the year before, but have you all given any more thought? I know you have where you go through downtown, the parade. And I mentioned the idea of a cabalgata through the neighborhood, which is like a tradition in Mexico where people like gather on their horses and they ride through the little towns, like on their festival days and whatnot. So it's a practice that probably a lot of people in the neighborhood are familiar with, and I think would really appreciate and like the idea, given like the horse culture that's with the youth and in the community. So I don't know what the logistics of that might be, but I can connect you to folks that could know how to organize that.
We want to run into the bulls down the
I think we can do it. Wow.
What do you call it?
Cabalgata.
Cabalgata.
Email me somebody's name and we'll start talking to them.
It'll be the running of the Bulldogs. So next we have Nancy Walsh, and she just told me your name and I already can't pronounce it again.
No, Jocelyn has to report. She only gets one tonight.
I'm going to combo with mine.
Well, yeah, we're going to come back.
She gets one.
So it's Nancy and Trelaw.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're all well. Things are going great at the museum, and I am absolutely delighted to introduce my colleague, Trelaw Bauer. She's going to be coming to these meetings with me, and you'll see her pretty often. And one of the reasons why she really wanted to be here is because she's been doing a lot of work in the schools with Swansea and Elyria, and Garden Place. And so I wanted to pass the mic to her.
Thank you all for welcoming me. I have been working with United Way through the United Neighborhoods Project on the Education Committee. We're actually going to be, the museum is going to be in Swansea Elementary next week. We're debuting our new outreach programs in their kindergarten, 3rd, and 5th grade classes. We're going to do some filming of those. So hopefully at some future meeting, I can bring that film in and show you those kids in the elementary doing their STEM education. Also, just to a total personal aside, I came here from Fort Collins, and we actually have a strange historical tie to Globeville. Some of our very earliest sugar beet industry workers were recruited from the Globeville neighborhood, so I'm really excited to kind of come full circle and get involved in this project and learn more about people who live in Globeville today. Thank you.
All right, we're going to now go to Tim. History Colorado's not here. Oh, okay. So you're welcome, Mr. Sandoz. I reported to everybody you were tied up in the city in a meetings.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, and this is a hard place to get to from the city anytime after 5 o'clock.
Yeah,
so.
I think it's one of your projects.
You believe so?
Yeah, we need you to get the
Just
Hyperloop.
wanted you to point it out.
Well said.
Your jurisdiction.
Well said.
We need the Hyperloop to come here from downtown.
There we go. Just loop over or something. Let's see what we can do. Michael is passing out a couple documents that I wanted to share with everybody. On a side note, personally, this is the last time you'll see the beard. It was No Shave November. November ends in another day or two, and this will not be here next week. According to both my wife and my new granddaughter, and say, Poppy, you can't have a beard no more. So enjoy it while we got it. The first thing I want to talk about is with the handouts. We are going to have an NDCC open house, and it'll be this document, and it's a final public meeting for the Carpio Sanguinetti Park Master Plan, formerly Heron Pond and Northside Park. That will be taking place December 13th at Laridan Hall, 5100 Lincoln Street. There have been a group of people who have been working very hard at the advisory committee, looking at all the options that we've got. We've been able to work through those recommendations and include them into what the master plan is going to be, and we'll be presenting it at that time. And we're particularly pleased that we get to talk about it as Carpio Sanguinetti Park. So we just wanted you all to be aware of that. Hope that you will all be able to come, again, December 13th from 6 to 7:30 at Laridan Hall. The second document that you have is an application for boards and commissions. The CAC has done, I think, a tremendous job of working through people who would want to be able to be named to the board on behalf of the mayor. The mayor has 6 positions that he has the opportunity to name. These are the applications for any of you who would wish to apply to be a board member, and you would need to just complete this and be able to send it in by the 3rd of December for that consideration. So Councilman Brooks had shared this with us. Fortunately, he was not able to be here. It said the 1st?
Yeah, Tim.
Okay, then let me go to the 1st. I apologize. Thank you for that.
So Tim, Albus also, Councilman Brooks called me also, and we put out a notice to the whole CAC, yesterday that if you wanted to apply to be safe, you should do it by end of business tomorrow, which is Friday, December 1st.
Oh, wow.
Because the mayor is there's meetings starting on Monday, so we were nervous internally that they're going to start reviewing. So we were nervous that noon on December 3rd may be a little too late. So I know that there's already CSC members who have applied, and we sent the link in, but we also brought extra copies of the app, so thank you so much for doing that, because that was also on our agenda. So, but we put in December 1.
Yeah, this is just in addition to, I mean, there are over 150 boards and commissions in the city. And
Oh, so you're talking about other boards and commissions.
Boards.
Got
So
it,
we
okay.
love to have
Sorry,
your
I thought
participation on
it
other
was
boards
authority.
and commissions as well.
Well, so did I, but never mind.
Okay, so if you want to apply for the authority, you should do it by tomorrow.
Exactly.
If you want to look at other boards and commissions, you have a little more time.
Correct.
Okay, thank
Great.
you, Michael.
Thank you for the corrections, both Maria and Michael. I appreciate it very much. Now, the third thing that I wanted to talk about, you'll see the third handout, is the NDCC Summary 2018 Work Plan. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this other than to give you kind of a heads up about the things that we're looking for in our 2018 work plan and what we're going to have coming. I wanted you all to be able to see this first. We can't get into the kind of detail that we want to be able to do here at the CAC because we just need to take more time to describe it appropriately. We will be, after the first of the year, holding a community event where we will show you all of the 2018 work plan, give more details, and talk through the work that we're going to be doing in 2018. So just to point out a couple things, 47th and York bike and pedestrian bridge passed on the bond issue. That will begin work in 2018. Denham Park picnic sites and Argo Park, both have been completed this year, but we will be completing additional picnic sites next year. Washington Street, another major request from this community. Will begin the formal design work to move to construction into 2018. Two other things that are important. We've got North Denver Stormwater Management Systems Project. That is where we'll be coming through the community and sharing with you some of the new things that we've been learning about drainage, about flood control. Every project that we have here has some association with drainage and flood control. So we're wanting to be able to bring that to the community, talk about that in greater detail, show you some new research that we've learned just in the last couple months, and then ask for the community's help on where we're going to go and how we address these things. So that's going to be a major piece of work for us. And then next, the GES Entrepreneurship Small Business Expansion Market Study. This is, again, to work with the business communities, small businesses, about what are the opportunities that may be available for them, what are they doing now, what would they like to see to help grow or expand the small businesses through the community, and how we might be able to make those available through the other projects that we've got. Brighton Boulevard will see completion from 29th to 40th. Next year we'll begin 40th to 44th Street, along with the Globeville Landing Outfill Phase 2 projects. Under River North, again, Globeville Landing projects are there. River North Buildings, River North Promenade, those will be begun in 2018. I want to spend just a second more on Central 70 mitigation. We have been doing extremely well, much better than we thought, with the mitigation work for the 268 homes that have been impacted or will be impacted by Central 70. We have been able to communicate with 72%, probably more now, of the community and the people who are in the impacted area. We have already completed the investigations for over 50 of those homes. We have another 50 roughly that are scheduled for the remainder of the year, and then several more for the following year in 2018. 1 out of every 3 homes, we are finding some major default that normally would be recommended for the home to be shut down for people to be evicted. Because of the partnership that the city has brought to the table, we are actually able to repair each of those homes rather than vacating anybody or asking anybody to leave. And that is really quite amazing, given the 1 out of 3 homes has some major defect that we're having to address. So we're real pleased about our ability to get that work done. On the other side, we've got a variety of transit-oriented development mobility projects, community engagement, including the events that we will continue to sponsor in the next year in partnership with the community. A variety of different programs like Photo Project, funding that we do for Swansea and Garden Place elementary schools to fund their advisors who help create parental involvement and sponsorships for kids in the schools. This next year we're also going to be working on a project called Todos Activos. We received a grant about 2 months ago for $300,000. We are able to take students from Bruce Randolph, engage them in the process of identifying the kinds of equipment that they want in the parks, select parks where they would like to do this, and work through it from a community engagement standpoint, actually going with the city to look at the equipment and making the selections of the equipment, and then every process that the city uses. It's a way for us to be able to engage youngsters really from the 12 to 16-year-old age segment, to be able to help them to understand what it's like to work in city government, how we produce these projects. So that's going to be a great project for us. And then economic mobility programs. There are 5, excuse me, that we've listed there. We want to be able to come back again in what we're doing next year to show what we'll be doing in those empowerment and leadership programs, investment and marketing for small businesses, career residencies, mini grants, and online high school scholarship extension support for GES. Again, there's so much detail in this, we simply don't have the time to give it justice at the CAC meetings. So after the first of the year, we would like to invite you to come when we go through a much more detailed description of each of these projects. And that's all I have tonight. Any questions?
Hey, Tim.
Yes, sir.
Can you highlight? We've done that before, like up at Stapleton Rec, you know, where the kids picked out all the equipment.
Uh-huh.
And the thing we've been fighting is there's no lighting. We need lighting more than anything. And if you can twist somebody's arm, we never, you know, the city and the police department, they're never on the same page, but we need lighting worse than anything.
So I think that's a great recommendation that we'll follow up with Chris, Michael. I don't know if you know anything about it right now. Do you have a good answer?
So we do have a lighting program that we work with Excel.
Sorry, Chris Pacheco, Deputy Director, NWC-CAC. So we do have a lighting program that we work with Excel to see where we can get lighting. You know, as you have areas that you know, like, hey, we want more lighting, that the lighting's broke, let us know and we can work with Excel to go through there and check it out.
Yeah, but do you work with the rec center and that too? Because we haven't seen it.
We do work with parks. Again, just let us know where you want lighting and we can try to work through that. You know, we have groups who want to help with this particular thing, so just let us know where, and then we can kind of see where we can put attention to it.
And the great thing about Pueblos Activos, we will bring the young people who are involved so that you can share what your concerns are, because they're the ones that are actually going to be selecting lighting, equipment, those sorts of things. So it's a great way to integrate the kids into what we're doing. Yes?
Tim, I just wanted to go back to the housing and just have you make it clear that the improvements that are happening to the homes where those things were not part of the mitigation that are getting done are not coming out of the mitigation dollars, that there are other resources that are being used that are assisting to take care of those things, so that each home that is supposed to get the mitigation is going to get done. So I just wanted to clarify that.
That's an excellent point, and thank you. And so let me clarify a little bit more around that. The partnership between the city and the CDOT guaranteed the completion of the products that CDOT was going to be providing. The 1 out of 3 homes that I talked about where we're doing more mitigations are a combination of money that comes from the city, because we did partner with that, and then actually working through contracts with Dura and EOC where we can use either federal funding or other mechanisms to add to that. So in a number of instances, the money that we're coordinating is coming from independent sources in addition to what the city is doing there. So it allows us to leverage the funding and be able to expand substantially what we're able to provide for the community in those instances. That is our role at NWC-CAC, to align, coordinate all the services that we can find both within city government, state government, and federal funding, utilize those all for the betterment of our community, and that's what's happening. So thank you for that, asking that question or having me clarify that.
We got to get back to NWC business, I know, but just one quick thing, since it's here, and Debbie's here and can help us. The naming of the park needs to be clear. We talked about this flyer at the steering committee last night, where you've got formerly Heron Pond and Northside Park. That is a little bit misleading, because Heron Pond is still Heron Pond, and the area that was renamed not to belabor it, but we've got some confusion in the neighborhoods, and then with what Rhino, the River North part. So maybe as time goes on, we can graphically maybe move things that say Globeville into the GES area, because there's a fuzziness of neighborhood borders that's developing, and I just ask for us to keep that up.
Great recommendation. Michael, you got something out there?
No, A is absolutely correct. Scott Gilmore actually caught that, shared it with Centuray and I yesterday. These flyers had already been printed. Duly noted, we'll make the correction.
But let me make one clarification. So as you guys know, when we did the park naming, we made sure that there were enough signatures included to cover the 20 acres that has not yet been folded into the park. So that's the 20 acres that's immediately west of Northside Park. So just want to make sure everybody understands that.
And let me tell you, we're doing better. I mean, the first time we printed it up, we had Sanguinetti spelled wrong. So we're still working on it, but we'll do better, I promise.
Well, I don't want to stir things up, but eventually, Tim, I want you to pay attention to this. I don't want to put no more work on you, but eventually, we're going to rename the entire area. And there's going to be strong community ownership invested in that area. Like I said, no more work for you, but along with your other planning, I suggest that you plan for some type of, maybe a summer solstice pachanga at that area, so we can clarify the name and everything else.
Everybody know what a pachanga is?
Yeah, but they got to be proud of now and then.
Yeah, it'd be great fun. Pachanga is where you dig a hole.
Yes.
You fill it with rocks. You put
We'll do that.
chicken, pork, or whatever you
whole
want to
bit.
cook. Then you bury it and let it cook.
And we got some people in the community can do that.
Yeah, the challenge of that is going to be cutting up whatever part you're going to do to dig holes. I don't know.
Dave's got a lot of experience in that.
Oh, wait, sorry, Dave.
The other thing you can maybe, Heron Pond, the nickname in the neighborhood is Heroin Park. We've got to do something.
Let's change that.
Yeah, it's got to be.
We'll look to change that, Dave.
Okay.
That's where that lighting comes in.
There you go.
And we need to change to Stapleton, as long as we're on the name change.
Yeah.
Super confusing
Got a lot of
and not a great name change.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's get back to our regular scheduled agenda. Maria.
Oh, okay. So let's go to, Tim, you're done, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right. Back to CIC business items. The update on the meeting with Mayor Hancock. Let's see, so AE, you were there, Jim, you were there, John, you were there. Who else was there? Drew, you were there. So do any of you, Liliana, were you there? So it would be good if you guys would very briefly decide which one you want to give us a characterization of the meeting on it. So who wants to? Liliana, go.
So everyone else jump in if I miss anything. But I thought, so we met with Mayor Hancock to propose sort of, I forget what we call them, but guidelines in selecting people for the authority board, particularly those coming from the neighborhood, but we really emphasize and encourage that really all of these sort of characteristics and values should be had by anyone else on the board. Something that really stood out to me was again, several times that both from members and Councilperson Brooks really emphasized the fact that there could be more than two people from the neighborhoods to be present on that authority board. So that was encouraging, and hopefully we have more than just two people representing the neighborhood on the authority. So I don't know if anyone else.
just historically, basically, I think the group did a really good job of representing the collective document that was developed for criteria out of a couple special discussions, special meetings, and that the mayor, I was watching when he was taking notes on which items, and I was kind of encouraged by that. And I think that the general emphasis on there being a good, rich combination of qualities on the people that are selected to the authority is important. There won't be any litmus tests, and that the commitment to it being not just a token inclusion of the neighborhoods is really important, and I think that got across in the conversation, would you say? So I was encouraged by the fact that became an anchor document that this group generated, and I think it's going to be very helpful going forward as the authority sets its priorities.
Anybody else want to chime in? Drew? John? Jim?
Hey, do we want to go on to the next thing, Maria?
Jim. Oh, Jim.
You want
And
to
John.
say something? Yep.
No.
I guess I would just add that the mayor was very engaged, and we had each one of us had a chance to speak, and there seemed to be very much the willingness to take all the feedback that we provided and add that to his thinking as he's making the selections.
Frankly, I was very impressed. Before I go further, I want to thank everybody in this room that had input into the criteria, because I could see the mayor was very impressed. He said so himself, and I don't think he was BSing us in that statement. I think we owe Liz Adams a lot of thanks for her effort in putting this together and marshaling us together up in the mayor's council office. Obviously, we owe Councilman Brooks great thanks in doing this. I was impressed. I was a little apprehensive at first, but we put it all together and pulled it off great. The mayor said he was impressed, and he loved the criteria. So thank everybody here for the input that you did have. Thank you.
Anything else?
So I want to add on to the thanks that when we were finalizing that criteria document, AE provided some really great input on that document, and I want to say thank you for that. You gave some good edits, and we worked out some things on the phone, and I think it was really a better document for all of those things that you suggested to me. So it was kind of a rushed process, and so we all came together and worked together, and AE put in extra effort for that, and I want to say thank you to her for that.
John now wants to say something.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, no, do you want to say one more thing? Because I was going to move on to the next. Yep.
You know, again, I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. We as a group here, we have done some fantastic, I think, astonishing things in the last 4 years that we've worked at this. And I think I was sitting at that table there and thinking about how we've taken stepstones to get where we are. And damn it, from now on, we can take it all on.
Hear, hear. If we all had glasses, we'd be saying cheers. That's right. Thanks, John. So there are just a couple more CAC business items. I'm going to move quickly because we've got to get into some of the other information. But as you know, the last time we talked a little bit about membership. We talked about, the fact that I'm now passing this sheet around to track who's here a little better than I have in the past. And that as people are not showing up, we're going to contact those people and ask them whether they're interested in still being a part of the group. The other thing we talked about was that, there is a process to bring more members on if people want to have more members come on. And so I encourage you that as you're in the community, if there are other people that think they want to be involved, that is something that they can do. They can come to a couple of meetings, they can write a letter, and then you as a group can decide if you want to expand the membership some. So we've lost a couple of members. So our numbers are down a little bit. So that is a responsibility that goes to you as members of this group representing the community to put that out there as something that people could do. The other thing I wanted to remind you all about is that our December meeting is going to be on December 14th.
We have some important work to do related to, and you'll find that out as we talk about site planning. And one, Maria Garcia Berry has offered to provide food for that meeting, like a meal. So,
Well, you know, it's Christmas, right? And just be forewarned, it'll be Cuban oriented. So get ready for, you know, roasted pig and black beans and rice, baby.
I've got some black beans in my car.
Huh?
I've got 20 cans of black beans in my car. I'll give to you tonight.
There we go. I love it. So I just, you know, we gotta have a little Cuban food here. So
That includes Cuban rum.
yes, John, I will bring a bottle of Cuban rum.
and we can do that after our meeting.
After our meeting, no rum before the meeting.
The last thing that I'm going to do as a bit of business is...
And no, I don't have any damn cigars.
I'm going to pass this roster around yet again. I've been editing and changing, and I'm going to have you add things or change things. Again, there are a lot of moving parts. So if you'll just make any edits on this, and then I will make those to the roster again. And with that,
Jocelyn.
Just have one more.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
So last time I talked about revisiting the onboarding process and just like checking in and figuring out if that process is right. It worked 4 years ago, and so just checking in on how welcoming we are to potential members and what the process looks like for people that have not been in these conversations for the last 4 years, and kind of how hard it is to kind of jump in with some of these things. So that's to do for the next couple.
Yeah, what we
meetings.
thought, we have not received any letters from anybody. We will continue pushing that, and if you guys could get it out there. I think if we do get some people who want to add to the committee, I think we ought to do a special onboarding process for them, and we're committed to doing that, making sure that they, can do that. But I agree.
Just real quick. Could you memo, maybe not tonight, I think it would be good to know what the representation, what the vacancies, what category the vacancies are that have occurred.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will get that to you. David?
The meeting on the 14th, can I get you to put a half an hour on the agenda for National Jewish and Groundworks Denver? This is an air monitor I've been wearing for 3 days for the neighborhoods.
Okay.
We've been doing a lot of air monitoring since 2012, and they would like to come and explain this, and also with the city with Michael Ogletree. He works with Greg Thomas of Air Monitoring, and he'd be here too. We take about 30 minutes to give you the rundown of what we've been doing.
So it's Groundwork Denver, National Jewish?
Groundwork, National Jewish, and the city.
Okay. We will do that.
Just as an FYI, the data from the air monitor on Swansea Elementary, they've been compiling that data, and so we're beginning to have baseline information before the I-70 project starts.
Okay.
So that might be something
That's
they
part
can
of it
bring.
too.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're going to give you all of what we've been doing for years. So it'll take about a half hour.
Okay. All right.
Not to backtrack, but if we are looking at onboarding, I think we should also think about folks who pass on, like Kobe used to say, and I haven't received any kind of onboarding. I would love that.
Great.
I've been trying to catch up, but I'd be appreciated.
That'd be great. Anything else on CSE? The only one thing, Armando's not here, but I don't know if you all knew recently that, some of us have been really involved, all of you have been very involved in Garden Place Elementary and their whole garden and everything else. I don't know if you know, but that John Prosser passed away 10 or 15 days ago, 10 days ago, I think it was, last week, right before it. So I just wanted to mention that for all of you, because he was very instrumental in getting some of the money raised for Garden Place and what they're doing. So I did not know if you guys knew that. All right, so where's Jocelyn?
She's up at the podium ready to go.
Oh, there you are.
ready to go.
Okay, it's all yours, Jocelyn.
Oops.
No.
No,
Yeah, sorry.
you're too tall for the microphone.
I
have
think
to
you
kind of
are.
do that.
Here.
Thank you. Is that better?
Yes.
Great. Great. So it occurred to us that while CSU is doing a lot of different things in the neighborhoods, and sometimes you hear about them at these meetings, that there may be some things that you haven't heard about. So we wanted to take a moment to sort of more comprehensively talk through all of the ways in which CSU has been engaging in GES over, a lot of these are things that have happened in the last year or so, but some of these things have been ongoing for quite some time and have been undertaken with a lot of your help and collaboration. So first of all, one of the things we want to highlight is sort of what our approach has been and why it is that we are doing the things that we're doing and maybe not doing some of the other things that, well, we're not doing the things we're not doing, right? CSU, we're really interested in learning from you all, right? This is one of the things that I've been focused on over the last 4 years at these meetings, at various other meetings, really understanding what it is that community interests are, what it is that community needs are, and how specifically CSU can engage. Right, there are lots of folks who are working in the neighborhoods, who are present in the neighborhoods, lots of things that you all are engaged in, and we wanted to understand what is CSU uniquely suited to do? What are our skills that we can bring? Who are our experts or existing programs that would be the best fit for what you already have identified? Right, there are lots of different plans that have happened and conversations that are happening. We weren't really interested in coming around and asking the same questions that you've been asked 1,000 times by various people. So really understanding from existing conversations and meetings what was happening, and then figuring out how best to fit in. So there are a number of different ways we are going about this. Again, with the idea of not recreating the wheel. So attending existing events. So you all have seen us at a lot of things like Globeville Days and the Fall Feast and other things that are already happening. So we are engaging in that way. We are also doing more direct community outreach activities. We're focused on educational opportunities. I mean, that's kind of not that surprising as a university that we would prioritize the educational piece. And really understanding how we can partner with events that are already happening, bring GES residents and students into existing CSU programs that maybe aren't happening in the neighborhoods but are happening in other places. And I'll describe examples of each of these here in a minute. And then really understanding how we can use all of these different experiences and ways that we're engaging with the community to get some feedback from community members about what it is that CSU can be providing, doing now, doing later. We sort of have two different questions that we want to ask, right? What are the things that we can do right now with the existing facilities and groups and people that are here working? And what are the kind of the long-term things that the community is interested in having CSU provide once there are new facilities at the National Western? So specifically, we have a few organizations that we have collaborated with more frequently. So for example, Clinica Tepeyac, we have worked with in a variety of different ways, and I'll talk more about that. Focus points, local schools, we have existing ongoing relationships and conversations happening with Bruce Randolph Garden Place in Swansea. The Denver Public Library, we are partnering with them to offer after-school programs at the Valdez Perry branch. And also we have, building on a very long-standing relationship with the Grow House that has existed with CSU Extension, we continue to collaborate with them on things related to food, which again is kind of an obvious place where we're focusing. So, and here I want to really give a lot of credit to Tiana Nelson, who many of you have met and worked with, who could not be here tonight because she is an amazing human being and has also started a pet fostering nonprofit called POSCO. And that is a very successful organization, and she had another commitment with POSCO tonight, so she could not be here. But she sends her apologies. But she has really been working on collaboration with Bruce Randolph. And so we have brought down our Little Shop of Physics program. Most of you, I think, saw Little Shop of Physics at the community celebration at the Coliseum after the groundbreaking. So they have all kinds of hands-on activities that they bring down. So they have come down and done one day at Bruce Randolph, and they will do a second one before the end of the year. We have been engaging Bruce Randolph students in various different CSU events. You all also saw them at the groundbreaking, so we've been trying to figure out how to engage them also, and this was an idea that was sort of a collaborative idea between CSU and the National Western Center partners to be sure that Bruce Randolph students were engaged at the groundbreaking. We also are, for the second year, offering equine-assisted therapy specifically for Bruce Randolph students, as well as an opportunity for students to come and volunteer to take care of the horses in addition to the therapy, so that's a great opportunity. And we've been working very closely with their AP Human Geography and AP Civics class on helping students understand how it is that they can engage in civic decision-making. So how do they think about how their voice can be heard, and ways in which to develop the skills to do that in a productive way, especially for students who are living in neighborhoods that are seeing so much change. It's really important. So one of the things we're also thinking about is understanding from students at Bruce Randolph what they would like to have us do to think about a pipeline to get students up to CSU. So last year, both the salutatorian and valedictorian from Bruce Randolph went to CSU. So we would like to continue to see that close relationship and to encourage additional students to think about CSU as an opportunity for them, or really college as an opportunity, but CSU. So we're thinking about how we can start younger, have 8th graders, 9th graders start to think about their pathway to college and how we can provide opportunities to get them there. Again, this is a collaborative idea with other partners at the National Western Center, but can we think about a youth advisory group so that we have something that is much like this for youth? Maybe they're participating here even. And we're also working with others to think about having a garden at Bruce Randolph, as well as teacher training opportunities. So lots happening there, and again, Tiana has been such a leader on pulling all of that together, and I want to just be sure that she is given all due credit. And I think many of you heard Ana Campos speak at the groundbreaking, so this is one of the quotes from what she said at the groundbreaking, but again, we're just really thinking about how student voices can be empowered. You've heard me talk about this a lot, but this last year was the 4th year that we've offered the pet clinic at Focus Points, and this year, as I mentioned already in previous meetings, we also included a human health component. We think that was really successful. We had vaccines and some health screenings in partnership with CU, and that was a really great collaboration. And this year, I think I gave you these numbers already, but we had more than 100 animals come through, 35 spay neuters, and we gave 100 flu shots. So we see that as a really great example of programming that we can offer now, and we will offer later, right? It's this continuation, starting the things that we're going to do later. So this is a shot of Little Shop of Physics. So they have, the way Little Shop of Physics works is it's all student driven. They come up with ideas for different experiments that they can bring out to do outreach with younger kids. So some of the students are physics majors, some of them are not. They just kind of caught the physics bug by being exposed to Little Shop of Physics, and they're there. I went through their kind of workshop space up on campus a couple of months ago, and it's amazing. They're just there tinkering with things and trying to figure out what's cool and what might make a younger kid get excited about science. So you saw some of those examples if you came to the community celebration, and we're really excited to have them coming back to Bruce Randolph to continue that collaboration. We also have, for the last 2 years, worked with Extreme Community Makeover. We have a program called CM Cares, which is our construction management program. So that is students in construction management doing various different volunteer programs. And so these kids who have expertise in construction can come down and help during an Extreme Community Makeover Day. And if you're not familiar with that organization, what they do is that they pick a block in a set of different neighborhoods within Denver, go door to door and ask people what it is that they might want done, and then come back with a whole slew of volunteers on a day and get all of those things taken care of. So I didn't participate this past year, but I did the year before, and we painted a house and did some yard cleanup, and it really feels good at the end of the day to see how productive you can be with many hands working in one place. So I would encourage you to volunteer in that next year if you'd like to. We also have an ongoing relationship with Clinica, as we've already mentioned. So Amy Parsons, this is not the most direct connection, but it might be the most fun. So Amy Parsons, who many of you know as my boss, was a tortilla roller this past year. She did not win. She is still a little bit annoyed about that, but I'm just kidding.
next year.
She was a good sport. We did have a presence there and have had presence at other different Clinton events. We have had some public health researchers who've been working with Clinica on various different research opportunities. Our students came down and participated. Our triathlon team came down and participated in the 5K. You can see them there looking very fit. They're an example to all of us. And our extension office participates in their garden. So wrapping up, two more things I want to mention. One is that for the last several years, we have also offered free soil testing to GES neighbors. And this is, we offer soil testing to anybody who would like it. So you can get a soil testing kit and get instructions, take a soil sample from your yard, and then send it into CSU, and our experts up there will tell you if you need to add different nutrients to make your garden more productive. For example, if you really are into growing tomatoes, they can tell you if you've got the right nutrient balance and how to make your soil better for what it is that you want to do. And AE has been really instrumental in helping us to get those soil kits into the hands of her network of people who are interested in gardening and various different folks here. And we think that's a great stepping stone to additional efforts to continue to do outreach with folks who are interested in gardening in this area. In addition, so if any of you are interested in soil testing kits, you can talk to AE, you can talk to me, and we'll get you one. Probably best to do it for next summer because we're coming up on the time when the ground is frozen. It's going to be pretty hard to do. The last thing I will mention, and we neglected to have a slide on it, is the Water Fellows program. So we have someone from the Colorado Water Institute who worked very closely with Michael Sapp, actually, to pair up 6 students, I think it was 6 students from CSU, through a program where they learned a lot about water. Some of them, in conversations that we had with them a couple of weeks ago, are considering changing the direction that they were going in academically to include water in what they're doing. And so that's a really positive result in and of itself, but they also collaborated with high schoolers from DPS to help expose them to issues around water that are really important to them. And really the effort there is to try to increase interest in and diversity in the folks who are working in the water sector, because it is such an important one for the state of Colorado and will be one of the first things that we're addressing, at least from the CSU front on National Western Grow. So I will stop there and ask for thoughts, suggestions, questions. Yes, sir.
The water educational effort this summer. Actually, I attended a couple of sessions there, and I was very impressed by, first of all, the attitude of the youngsters present and their involvement. And I would like to see that evolve into more next year, whenever.
Yes.
I think it's a good effort, and it opened my eyes a lot just listening. But and you hit the nail on the head. Some of the youngsters there from CSU were really, at first superficially, but then very interested. And it was Mary Lou Smith, who was the person from CSU that conducted that program with Michael's assistant. I thought did a tremendous job, but I'd like to see more of that expanded through the neighborhood, because water is going to be the big issue in their lifetime.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. Yes, and I will pass on your comments to Mary Lou, and I will also let you know that we are planning on doing another round of Water Fellows this year. So they are starting now, or well, they're starting in January for another semester's worth, and then hopefully moving into the summer. And it's in part will be supported by the CH2M Foundation. They have donated to continue the Water Fellows program. Yes?
And I think I should make full disclosure here. I'd be less than I think I should make full disclosure. I'd be less than honest if I didn't have a self-interest presently Heron Pond. And we're going to have some CSU students involvement there in the future sometime, hopefully.
Jocelyn, the only thing I wanted to add is, as you look at the role that the Extreme Community Makeover plays, we have one building in our community that is going to need some major repair. It's owned by the city. This is the old Globeville Church. Formerly, the last use was a senior center. At one point, Focus Points had some programs there, but the city has done a structural analysis on the building. As soon as I-70 starts, the Anderson building is going to need to come down, and they will need a new location for where they will be doing the education, outreach, and training for folks who are interested in the construction jobs. Our library has expressed an interest in being in the building as well, with additional space on top of what we have at the Valdez Perry Library. And I'm just putting it out there that this is a possibility, that we may be able to find some dollars, but maybe this is something the Extreme Community Makeover can participate in, because it will have a community use. And that's been a commitment from the city going back to, I think it was last summer, they did a half-day work session with the community asking what they wanted to see in the building.
So Extreme Community Makeover is its own nonprofit organization that we're partnering with. But I can certainly pass that on to them as something to explore. I don't know how they make decisions about where they go and what they do, but that's great. Thanks for that suggestion.
Now, Jocelyn, is Angela Bumgard still running that?
Tiana's been the one who's been more connected with her. It sounds like AE is saying yes. The name is familiar, so I think that's yes. Yeah.
Because I'd like to get some cards, because I know a lot of people that need a lot of stuff done.
Any other questions for Jocelyn? Thank you, Jocelyn. Oh, AE.
This is an awesome list.
Oh, thank you.
What you guys are doing.
I appreciate that.
Just very connected to what Debbie was saying, that's the 4400 Lincoln building, right? I would request that you consider opening up a very specific current events type of thing with the water thing. It is current events for example, this molybdenum thing that's just come up. I grew up next to Climax Molybdenum, this thing over there in Golden. But this is a perfect example of where the National Western Center partnership with CSU could enter into current events that help us understand what the issues are with water right now that are within the core themes of the mission of what we're doing. And the workshop that Councilwoman Ortega was talking about, there were conversations about education in STEM, and bringing the libraries in is a very real possibility. And there could be a current events center right in the neighborhood where we have Heron Pond, which is something we're trying to leverage interest in and finding possible amounts of money to clean up. So if we could do real-time stuff at this point, it would be phenomenal. And those issues coming up with water could be classified as that, because then the groundswell can be the whole citizenry there.
Yeah, thanks, AE. That's a good suggestion.
Any other questions for Jocelyn? Seeing none?
Yeah, Tim. I'll just say in closing, I need to scoot out a little bit early tonight, and I'm in looking at next month's date on the 14th. Another hat I wear is I'm on the Coors Western Art Advisory Committee, and that is the night of the Young Guns Art Show, so I will not be able to be here. So I want to be the very first to wish you all a Happy New Year. I'm probably the first, right? So just thank you all and Happy Holidays, and I look forward to seeing you again in January.
Thank you. A Happy New Year to you as well, Jocelyn.
Right, now Gretchen's up.
Gretchen Hara, and she's going to do a complete program update on the National Western Center. Take it away, Gretchen.
Okay. I'm part one of two parts tonight. I'm going to start with a description of the baseline, scope, schedule, and budget for National Western Center's program. And I'm jumping ahead because then Eric and Jay are going to talk about placemaking and how we're already starting to brainstorm off of that regarding site design. But I wanted to start with the fundamentals. And so we've shown this before when we've talked about the framework agreement, and it's our snapshot timeline of all of the work that's happened from 2012 through today.
And I really always highlight 2015 as being one of the most important years in moving this program forward because the campus master plan was adopted by City Council, CSU received its COP financing, ballot measure 2C was passed by Denver voters in every precinct by a wide margin. The RTA award, which is our Regional Tourism Act from the state, that funding was awarded. And at that point in time, we went to voters and we talked about what we thought we were going to build. But we were doing that with no design, really just a high-level planning exercise and a really great and thoughtful master plan. And what we're able to do, we are now here at the end of 2017. And that last piece of work is called the program baseline. And that's where we move from the discussion we'd had in 2015. And then we had talked about an $856 million project as a cost model, no design, just kind of making some rough estimates off the master plan. And we talked about a $200 million gap very publicly. It was in the papers. And voters said to us at that time, people voted for it, and they, even with that gap, they trusted that we would be able to deliver a project with a scope, schedule, and budget that aligned, and that's where we're at today. So this is a good news story for our program, and I want to show you where we're at, and then we're going to move on to what we do next. So this is really about moving from planning to delivery, and this is a same slide presentation that we've been sharing with City Council members. We had actually intended to share this with you today and then do a media briefing in the beginning of December, and the media beat us to it and attended with, and I hadn't realized they were there, one of our presentations for RTA funds to Colorado's Economic Development Commission. They just didn't announce themselves, and they took a picture of me that ended up in the paper with half of someone's head. So it was just sort of a quick snapshot. So if you've seen this before, our intent was to be able to brief you on it first, and we bring all of our information here first. So if you saw it in the paper, this will seem familiar to you. So what is a baseline? A baseline is our, when we start tracking our starting point, it's our 0.0 for where we declare all of our project elements, our scope, schedule, budget, and every change that happens to any of those three items, we now, moving forward, count as a variance against our baseline, a change against our baseline that we will be reporting on publicly in front of City Council, in front of you, at least once a quarter. And it's part of how, with these three partners we brought together, we provide a lot of transparency to each other and to the community about what we're building and how it changes over time. Because the one thing about a baseline is it marks your starting point, and you keep designing and learning more, and it does change. So this will continue to change. This is our starting point. So it's what we are building, when we are building it, how much it will cost, and the schedule piece is a lot of the phasing of these elements. And as you know more about your scope, it may impact and change your budget and your schedule, and all three of these items are codependent on one another. So we've got cost in three broad categories that we're going to talk about. Program level costs include all of our planning work up front, logistics, it's where our 1% for public art program is handled, insurance for the campus construction, program management, that's where CH2M comes in as program managers, and our program level contingency. And by program, I mean for our project, at the program level, it is items that we need to pay for and support that impact every part of the campus that we're building. Horizontal portfolio is what you see. It's the early work we do on land acquisition. It's all the horizontal infrastructure. It's utilities and roads and bridges and building pad-ready sites for our partners, CSU for their 2 buildings. This is all phase 1 and 2, so there are 2 structures in phases 1 and 2, the Water Resources Center and the Equine Sports Medicine Facility. The vertical portfolio is when we go up. So we've included demolition in there because it's work on vertical structures, but it's really the big assets that are coming in, the livestock center, the equestrian center that come in on phases 1 and 2. And I will tell you, when we carry program level contingency, we will carry a greater degree of contingency where we see a greater level of risk. Most risk in this program is on that horizontal set of work, because that's where we are going in the ground. We may encounter environmental conditions we weren't aware of. we are negotiating land transactions, we have less control over outcomes. After we're done with the horizontal work and we're in that vertical piece, we have a lot more knowledge about what we're building and control over the contracts and construction. And that's when we're able to release contingency down to the vertical portfolio. So this is a schedule and that was handed out. Thank you. I think Brad did that. Because you can't read this. We are going to post this on the CAC link, but this is a schedule which starts to break down those categories of items that we're going to build. And this is the schedule. If we kept baseline exactly the way it is, scope, schedule, budget, this would be the schedule you would see. But it does start to mark when we're going to deliver some of the larger assets on the campus. The red diamonds at the bottom are when we deliver a pad-ready site to CSU for those 2 buildings that are in phases 1 and 2. And then they actually have ICON, their own program management team, that they will separately release their construction contracts to build their vertical structures, their 2 buildings. And I'm going to keep going and come back for questions. This is sources and uses. So this pie chart here, this is just a snapshot of our funding sources. This should be familiar to most folks. The $622 million in blue, that's the 2C funding that voters approved. That is visitor taxes, largely from excise taxes of lodgers tax and short-term car rental. Those are the visitors' taxes that pay for these new visitor facilities. That's the city's share of the funding there. The $51 million in red, that's the Regional Tourism Act funding award. That funding was $121.5 million over 36 years. To be able to use that money in the time frame we just looked at for construction, we have to finance against it. That's the construction proceeds available for the project up front and repaid over the 36 years. $50 million is the contribution from the WSSA that was included in the framework agreement. That's in addition to their $75 million worth of land value that they contribute to the program. $42 million is a blend of additional city funding that we have, which is investment earnings off of the debt issuances. We had $3.5 million already from our first $200 million worth of debt issuance. That was from the 2C funds that we've been using so far to acquire property and do some of the early construction prep. And it also includes the estimated amount we'll receive from CSU based on a formula where they pay us for their actual costs for pad-ready sites that we can hand over. So that will fluctuate a little bit as we know more about CSU's actual costs and we apply them to this formula. And we're happy to share that. It's the relationship between 2 public government entities just reconciling actual costs and payments for the services we provide them in those pad-ready sites. The right side is the capital build uses, so you can see in red the majority of the costs go through the horizontal side of the construction program. Green is the vertical construction, and the blue is the program level uses, so that includes all of the program level contingency. So you will see the shape of this pie adjust as we're able to release contingency too. This is a site map, and this is really where I'm going to let Eric go into this as he does his presentation, but this is the baseline site map. There are 1 or 2 changes that are different from the master plan, but generally everything lays out in the same order. So Eric, is that okay? I'll have you go through that.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay. And what this does is this takes, we have 2 big messages in this presentation, and one is that we were able to go from a 10-year construction timeline to 7 years for construction. That helps us reduce costs. We carry a 4% escalation every year that we continue the program. So the faster we go, the less we spend. The other big storyline is that we moved from, and if you can go to the prior slide, we moved from an $856 million cost model with a $200 million gap in 2015. And we've moved to a $765 million budget. That is the budget that accompanies the scope and the schedule that you saw in front of you and the map, which really depicts the scope. All 3 of those things travel together now, but with $765 million, there is no gap. All of the items that are included in scope and are fundamental to delivery of the campus can be delivered at $765 million and in 7 years, not 10 years. So this is This was a lot of work to get here, a lot of discussion and coordination with our partners and there are definitely things we would love to continue to enhance about the campus, and we'll be looking for additional funding partners over the next few years. Barb Frommel, who's our Director of Strategic Partnerships, that's her job. So anything we get for grant money, an additional partner that comes in, any of these folks that may contract with the authority, take for example telecom, if we can have their contract include the construction of some additional assets up front, you'll see 765 go up, but it will come up with scope or grants. If we get nothing, we can deliver this campus and all the components you're seeing at $765 million. And that's what we promised voters. We promised voters that if they approve 2C funding, we would be able to deliver something with those assets on schedule. And that's what we are set up to do. And the team has worked really hard to get to this point. And so I just also wanted to end with what we've spent so far. So the city issued $200 million worth of debt off of the 2C funds. And this is what we've been up to in the horizontal, vertical, and program-wide costs. So you can see we've been busy, well underway. A lot of this is on, most of this is on land acquisition. And as we move into 2018, you'll start to see more and more detailed reporting on costs, on progress on those individual project components that are on your schedule. And you'll see that you should be seeing that look the same quarter over quarter so that you're seeing the progress in a really predictable way. I told Liz I would do this in 8 minutes, and I think I'm a little long. 10 minutes. That's, $765 million in 10 minutes is pretty good. So I do want to hand it over to Eric and Jay because this is the base. And what we do now is we look to make it better. And he's going to talk about what some of those opportunities are.
And we're not holding any questions until after Eric because the two presentations are linked. And for going over by 2 minutes, you owe John Sappy and a bottle of scotch.
Wow. I'm going to have to talk really quick because I don't want to...
I don't think you drink scotch.
Okay, I just want to give everybody an update. Oh, wait, Julie, you wanted to go first, didn't you? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, you can go ahead. So I'll do this very quickly. I know we've got a lot going on. I'm Julie Skeen. I'm part of the placemaking team. I do public outreach and communications. And as we gave an update last month very quickly, part of what we're rolling into next is we're going to do a big survey. So we're going to do it online. We're going to translate it into Spanish. We're going to do it hard copy. We're going to try to get it out to as many different stakeholders in the community as well as industry associations and everywhere we can get. So part of what I'm here for, we're handing out a draft of the survey. Part of what we talked about last month is we wanted to give you guys an opportunity to see it first. So if you can take a look at it, get any comments back to me, get any comments back to Liz. I've got a whole pile of business cards here. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the survey. Are we missing something? Are you comfortable with the way the language is? Any thoughts and suggestions that you may have? The other thing I'm hoping to ask you for is help. Once we submit this survey, we'll probably have it out by the end of next week. So anytime to make changes, the next week or so, we'll get it out. Love your help in getting the word out about this. We're going to be working with all our partners. We're going to be going to the elementary schools. We're going to be posting things, in the local offices. We're going to be sending out emails, partnering with our teams. We're going to try to get this survey out to as many people as possible. I'll be working with my buddy Michael Sapp over here to use a lot of the email mailing lists we've already developed for NDCC, working with Marcy, getting stuff up on the Facebook page. So again, we're trying to just get this thing out everywhere we possibly can, and any help that you guys can provide, we'd be much appreciated. So take a look at the survey. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns, and you'll start seeing us in about a week. You'll start seeing this the survey out in hard copy and online. Thank you very much.
Will it go beyond the neighborhoods?
What's that?
Is it going beyond the neighborhoods?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, part of our plan for this survey is neighborhoods, communities, citywide, but we've also developed a very long list of industry associations, regionally, nationally, internationally, that we're going to be sending this to as well. So again, we're trying to make a really broad footprint on this. Any other questions?
What's your outcome?
What is our outcome? So this survey will feed right into the information that Jay's about to talk about with the site plan and the whole placemaking study. So this is actually going to be used to actually influence the decisions that are made by the technical team on the placemaking study. Julie, Can I, it's me.
Please.
Yeah, sorry. Voices. Right here, voices. I think everybody ought to really look at it, and particularly when it comes to the neighborhoods and the residents. I'm not sure that when you talk about undergoing a placemaking study, that most people understand what a placemaking study is. So if you don't have at least some definition at the beginning as to why this is important and what this determines, I don't think you're going to get, they may not think it's relevant, or they do whatever, but I think you need to really explain why placemaking is important and whatever.
We've developed a one-pager in Spanish and English that does, I think, a pretty good job of explaining what the placemaking study is, and we're planning on using that with this.
Okay.
That was our plan, and I'd be happy to provide that to you guys to review as well.
That would be good.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks.
I can send it to Liz.
Hi, just here.
Just a very first question on this survey. I noticed that you're saying that it's a visionary transformation of the National Western Complex and the Denver Coliseum site into year-round destination and regional asset. And I'm not sure that the plan really identifies the Coliseum site.
The boundaries do.
Well, the boundary's there, but I don't know if you want to characterize it as turning into an asset. I mean, I think it's part of the whole project, but I'm not sure that there's going to be... Well, you know, I'm not sure exactly what the plan is for the Coliseum site itself, so I don't know if you want to kind of mislead the public into thinking that it's going to be more of the National Western Center, because I'm not sure that's the case. So I think that might be unnecessary to be put there.
So that's a question we get a lot, because the redevelopment of the decommissioning of the Coliseum for those uses happens after you build the arena, and it's the last phase of the 8-phase program. So the baseline I just talked about is phases 1 and 2. Phases 3 through 8 is something to be tackled, and there are specific components of the framework agreement that the partners talked about steps that the city needs to take to get started on it, and really recourse remedies that the stock show has if the city fails to deliver that within a certain period of time. In phases 1 and 2, we did ask the placemaking team to look at all 8 phases, because the work that they are doing, you have to have a discussion of how those phases at a broad picture relate to one another, and then they'll take that broad view and then they'll use the detail work on just the phases 1 and 2. So what we may need to do is really, I'm worried about clarifying expectations, that somehow we're ready to go on phases 3 through 8, because there is no funding for that. And and maybe we just have to say we're looking at the campus as a whole, because that's what good planning is. But then when we do the delivery of what you're seeing in phases 1 and 2, that's where it'll be the detail. Because there is, it's definitely part of the campus, it's definitely part of our intention, but a lot of work to do. And ultimately, City Council would need to help us move a contract through to even get started on that.
And as you all recall, before the framework agreement moved forward, there was a commitment that the community would be able to have access to and utilization of the Coliseum. And we've had one internal conversation with some more work that needs to be done internally before we have something to present back to the community.
Well, and we'll absolutely look at that language. I think that's great feedback. The intention when you look at this, it's a little confusing when you're taking a survey, because you're talking about the National Western Center, but then you're saying, have you had experiences at the facility? So it's a little confusing. Are you talking about the facility as it exists today? Are you talking about what's going on in the future? So that's why we were trying to delineate that a little bit much, but I think your feedback's right on with that.
And thank you for asking the question about the Coliseum. What is the future of the Coliseum at this point? I mean, I've heard some rumors. Does anyone know?
Can I jump in?
I think we're hosting the Olympics there. Is that the rumor?
Right. Well,
by the way, for the record, since that is not true. Yeah.
So
No, it's not.
Is it scheduled for demolition?
No.
Wait.
No.
Time out.
Well,
so there are, what you just saw for baseline, those are the plans we have. Okay. What you see in the master plan is all we know with certainty about phases 3 through 8. Okay. But what Councilman Ortega identified is that's going to be an active asset for the city for a period of years. We're starting now to consider how to move phases 3 through 8 forward. So this work that we do right now to make that a facility that's active for community, I mean, you'll see it. The way to see is look at the city's budget. There's maintenance dollars for the Coliseum in the city's budget, and that will be the case for a number of years.
Yeah, here, let me.
Okay, Gretchen, thank you for clarifying that, because that's,
Well, and let me.
Eric's question is very.
Let me just say to me before, and Paul had to leave, but if Paul heard this discussion, he'd have a heart attack. The Coliseum cannot be demolished until a new arena is built, or the National Western goes out of business.
Was that decision made?
That decision has not been made.
There's no decision.
Because there's no money for new funding, but the intent is.
There's no decision.
That building allows National Western to continue doing their annual stock show event until that new arena is built. There's been no discussion about what happens after that yet.
There's no decision on
No
that.
decision. No decision.
But I think the discussion needs to happen on that, because we can't get to a point of like in 7 years and then go,
I brought up the Coliseum on many different occasions, and it's one of those buildings that has actually been, the city has been putting money into over the years, and it's actually in relatively good shape. And so from that standpoint, obviously it's very much in use now, but we are talking about transitioning to a arena that's going to take much of what the existing uses are in that Coliseum. So if we're going to have an asset like that and have a discussion about, is there a new life for it, we need to have that discussion now, during that 7-year, during that 10-year process, so that, because otherwise we'll be at a point where we just have a white elephant sitting right there.
So Patricia, and then we need to move on from the Coliseum,
Yeah.
because we have
Okay.
7 years to discuss
John,
this.
I just want to refer, John, is that?
We don't.
Well, we have at least a couple of years to discuss it, but right now is not the time. So
John,
let's do
is the
Patricia.
Coliseum, does it have a historic designation?
it does not, but it's definitely.
Okay, that's a conversation.
And that's its own separate discussion.
That's a separate discussion in of itself.
Wait, I know, Maria's gonna kill me, but
John, if you have a
I just have
Coliseum
one
comment,
last
could you
thing.
just-
About the timing, what I'll do is bring back the framework agreement steps to you next time that gives the city instructions from our partners. This is where the
I think it's
three
pages
partners
63
negotiated.
through, yeah.
Maria negotiated these. Let me bring those back, because there should be no surprises on the timeline and the discussion. We'll bring everything here, and it starts with understanding those steps, and then all of you've seen the work the city does to fulfill that requirement, which absolutely is a discussion of once those events move to the new arena, what happens to that building? No discussions have happened yet, but they will be timed along with the entire rest of the phases.
And I know John has a question, but I really want to hold
Is it on
the
the
rest of the
Coliseum?
questions until we finish with the placemaking. Question for Julie.
All right, go, Julie.
You're the last Julie question.
You want feedback on this?
Please.
Okay, you're going to have to get more copies for me and Dave then.
Okay.
Bunch of them.
I think we've got some extras. If not, I'll make sure that we mail them up to
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Julie. We're going to move on.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to give everybody just a primer again on campus placemaking to let everyone know where it's at. So there are 4 main components of campus placemaking. 2 of them are in play right now. The first one is program refinement. So we're meeting with CSU, Western Stock Show Association, the City of Denver, to make sure all the buildings have all the pieces that they need. All the right space, all the right storage, all the right offices, all the right arena sizes, all the right seating. So we are hashing through that right now. So we're refining all the footprints of the buildings, and that's key in the site planning, because how big the footprint is, it's how much it takes up the size of the site, okay? So that's the first piece, is the program refinement. Also with that program refinement task are all the historic and cultural resources components. And so the stuff that we talked about earlier, getting all the information on the historic components and coming back to you with a historic strategy is part of that task, okay? Task 2 is infrastructure design. So we have asked the MIG team to go through and do 15 to 30%, depends on the item, design for roadways, utilities, overlap grading, to be able to set the site to make sure we don't have any fatal flaws in any of the utility layouts, okay? So that's a key component. With that task, we have a task called site planning. And that was added kind of by the partner's request. We want to make sure we have the right site plan that we're building, okay? And so Jay's going to talk a little bit about that tonight. We have a couple of options that no one else has seen. You guys are the first to see these. So, and how we're refining the baseline to move that forward, okay? Then there's 2 other tasks in campus placemaking. The next one that'll be out probably in February is called Public Realm. And this is the one that ties to the study or the questionnaire that Julie just handed out of how do we plan for all the public space, all the public, how do the lobbies work with the outside? How do we make sure all those public spaces are useful, attractive, fun, and can be programmed year-round, okay? So that's the public realm piece. And then the last task order is design standards and guidelines. And these will be the guide words that are used by all the designers to move forward. So it'll have architecture, right-of-ways are in that, there's a historic component, signage and wayfinding, lighting, all those type of things will have design standards that go with them, okay? And that will probably be issued probably in April or May. We have to get through all this other stuff before they can finish up all the design standards and guidelines so that they then finish up all their work by the end of the year is what our goal is, okay? So those are the 4 components. So tonight, why don't you just go through this. We are in this site planning review, and Jay and his team have done amazing work over the last month to go from a number of different plans down to a few that we can look at that work for. 1, they have to fit on the site. 2, they have to be operational, so all the facilities have to be able, you have to be able to drive to them, you have to be able to deliver animals to them, you have to be able to have all the people running through them. So we've got that. And then the third component to that is how do they then create great places and spaces on the site. So in the infrastructure, we also have a controlling conditions map. Do we have that map? I think so. Good, okay. Okay. So anyway, so we have a controlling conditions map. There are all these things around the site that can't change that we have to tie into. Okay, so here's the map. We've got BNSF and RTD. We've got to make sure that works. We've got the river. We've got the railroads that we're going to have to tie into. We've got Race Court on the north end. We're not changing the grades up there. There's a lot of existing utilities. And then in the yellow are all the potential historic buildings on the site. We want to make sure we reuse those and keep all those. So all the site planning we do has to fit within this guideline for the controlling conditions. Okay? So, wow. Sorry, I'm kind of going back and forth here. So we have a set of evaluation criteria that we have set up. So the first one is operations, access, and circulation. So stock show needs to continue to operate every year. We're not closing them down as we build this, so that's a big condition. Need to meet all the site operational requirements. We have a lot of trucks and trailers. We call them special vehicles that have to come here. It's a totally different site plan because of that. When you have hundreds and hundreds of trucks and trailers that have to be dealt with delivering horses and cattle and equipment during the stock show and during other events, it's a different kind of place, okay? So we have to make sure that works. We have the roadway network so that we can get all those people in and out. And then we have to integrate into the neighborhoods. We want to make sure that this has a good front door on all sides. So then the neighborhood commitments from the master plan, we still want to maintain all these. We still have the 2 river bridges. We have pedestrian connection near the rail station, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I go into the site plan. Improve the overall circulation for the area in National Western, and then we want to keep all the riverfront access. We want to make sure we do engage the river, okay? And then phasing in constructability, we got to be able to build it. So how you phase it efficiently is key. We want to meet or accelerate the baseline schedule that Gretchen just went through. And then finally, it's got to be equal to or less than the cost, or else we have to go find more money to make it work, okay? So, We have the other partner concerns. National Western has their legacy building, and I believe they rolled that out to the public.
December 12th.
December 12th, all right. So that's a new building for them, so that has to be included. We have to meet the CSU Phase 1 and 2 criteria for their Animal Health Center and for their Water Resources Center. And the Water Resources Center also has Denver Water as part of it. So all those have to be accommodated in the site plan. And then we have to create opportunities for co-development. So we do want other development on the site. We want to be able to generate revenue throughout the year to be able to support other programs and the site itself. So we're going to look for places to put retail, restaurant, food places, whatever those co-development pieces may be, look at those, how we fit those into the site with the site plan. Okay, so our process today, we have developed the baseline, and I'll walk through that in a second. Jay did all this work, so I'm just talking about it, so that's all right. So 6 iterations of the alternatives. They brought it down from 15 to 2 is where we're at right now. And if you remember in the master plan, we went from probably 20 to 1 eventually. So this is a shortened process in that, but we also have all the programming information already. We're not redeveloping that like we did in the master plan. So we have worked with NewCo, City and County Denver, Stock Show, and CSU weekly work sessions. And then we have one-on-one sessions with CSU and the Stock Show and the city every week also to go through any specific details. And then city department meetings. And then we've started our series of costing discussions on these because we have to cost and phase these as we move forward. So here's the list of all the 15 alternatives that we had, and we've narrowed it down, and we'll go through the narrow ones. And then I'm going to start with the baseline. So Jay handed out this drawing here. The things that are adjusting on the site that really impact the site plan are where the rail ends up going, okay? So you remember, and we've talked about this, I think, at the last meeting, but the master plan put the consolidated Denver Rock Island Railroad right down the middle of the site. Okay, it was kind of a happy median between the east alignment and the west alignment. As we went through the baseline development, we found that the site was a lot less expensive and a lot more efficient by sliding that railroad over next to National Western Drive. Okay, this gives us a big open area to look at. But through Jay and his team, we also went back during the master plan, we looked at moving the railroad over against the Burlington Northern. Okay? That was an option that has been looked at a number of years ago. We wanted to bring that back. Again, we want to make sure we have the best site plan to move this forward. Okay? So these are the 3. The railroad really does define how the site lays out. All right? So on the baseline, this is the master plan, really. All right, so we're not, again, phases 1 and 2, we're not doing anything on the east side of the Burlington Northern tracks in phases 1 and 2, other than Ped Bridge Connections, and RTD is building their station here.
And land assembly.
Land acquisition, assembly, those kind of things, yeah, sorry, thank you. So in phases 1 and 2, we have the livestock center here with the arena and the livestock hall. And again, we're right-sizing these boxes to make sure they fit on the site. We have the equestrian center on the north with the large arena, paddock spaces, the equestrian barn, a small arena with more paddock spaces, and then the CSU Animal Health building is on the north end. And then in the baseline, the Water Resources Center for CSU is up right at Race and Franklin, right on this corner, on the north corner of the site. Then we have our 20 acres of yards, spaces for cattle tie-outs, and then we were reusing an existing building south of Betty Cram Drive for the maintenance facility. Okay, so that's the baseline. That's the $765 million that Gretchen talked about. That's what we are currently building. All right, and it matches the master plan pretty closely. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Jay. And we have 2 options that we want to run through with you. One is very similar to this. One is very different. But again, we just want to get this in front of you guys, have you start thinking about it. We're not really looking for direct comments tonight because this is the first time you're looking at it, but we will come back on the 14th of December to talk about that.
Will you just run down
Sure.
the river?
Sure. Okay, so South Platte River is here. All right? We have 2 bridges that come over the river. Betty Cram Drive, which is now on the 48th alignment. Rather, in the master plan, it had it up to 49th. The city already owns this right-of-way, so we have straightened this out, and it's less land that we have to purchase to make this work. And then we also have the 51st Street Bridge over the river that connects to 51st here, and then this is Northside Park in the Heron Pond area, okay? So, and then just I-70 is on the bottom of the drawing, and Brighton Boulevard is over here. The other thing I mentioned that I didn't mention in the baseline is that we are rebuilding Brighton Boulevard from Race to 47th, and that construction starts in February. Okay? Any other questions on the baseline?
Wait, Drew.
Oh, how could you forget the master?
Drew, you need a mic.
Here.
Mike.
This is coming. Oh, this is coming.
So there is no, phases 1 and 2, there's no work south of the Burlington Northern Tracks?
That's
Isn't
correct.
there horizontal preparation of the sites?
What we will do is we will size everything on this side to accept any utilities that have to go over here in phases 1 and 2. But there is no work on this side other than Brighton.
It has to stay operational.
So yeah, it has to stay operational with the stock show. So as the phasing on this is pretty complicated, but most of the stock show is done on this side with the existing event center and the Hall of Education, the building that we're in today, okay? The yards are right here right now. So the first thing that we have to do for phasing is to move the yards.
But I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding, but there is none of the 7 under the public monies, nothing is being spent in all of the south of that.
That's correct.
So that is all private.
We don't know, we do not know some other source. Yes, unfunded.
It's unfunded. Okay.
Yep. This is just for phases 1 and 2. All right. So with that, I will turn it over to Jay.
John, do you have a question?
Oh, sorry, John.
Go ahead, let Jay ask. I can ask later.
You sure?
Yeah.
Oh, go for it.
Okay, so I think you may recall in our, one of the last couple times that we were with you, we were talking about that rail alignment and some of the pros and cons of where the rail ends up. And so we looked at basically the baseline and how that was shaping up. And we helped to craft that. And as Eric said, generally the big change was that the rail moved. Another thing that it adjusted was that there were 2 rail bridges here, obviously. So we looked at that option, and we were working with the different partners and thinking about those pros and cons that they were identifying with the baseline. Some things had changed, program had evolved. If you recall in the master plan, the Water Resource Center was only 15,000 square feet. It was located right on the river. And so now with this exciting partnership with Denver Water, that is a much larger program, 150,000 square feet, maybe a little more, and that had moved to the north. So
There we go.
we'd heard some things from CSU about that access to the north. They're planning on bringing in school kids, some buses. They want access to the river for water quality testing and laboratory space. They'd like a family kind of K through 12 educational component. So they liked more visibility. We heard from Stock Show that locating maintenance down here, reusing that facility, as Eric had pointed out in the baseline, that created some operational problems for them, whereby they would be storing things, they'd have equipment, and then they'd have to get on a public road, drive north of Betty Cram, which ideally is this great east-west community access point, driving equipment across there, hauling dirt, other things, to get up to the facility. So in this west option, what we really tried to do was optimize this west alignment of the rail. So in this, there's a few major changes, or I guess changes, and largely it's what I just spoke to. So getting the Water Resource Center from the north end of the site to the south, more prominent, more community oriented, and then moving the maintenance to the north portion of the site. We explored a lot of other options related to this west alignment of the railroad being along here, because what we were thinking about was the access to the river, and what did that do to that riverfront access? Well, yes, in the master plan, this is a large event space. It is a lot of pavement. There's times when maybe it's used as parking. And is that the best act or adjacency to the riverfront? More importantly, there's fencing and rails adjacent. So we wanted to think about how to optimize that best, and we felt like this was beginning to do that by really celebrating this east-west connection through along Betty Cram, making that the best possible street it can be. And that's not just about the design of the street from curb to curb, but what is adjacent to that, what it activates that space. So those are kind of the larger, kind of the advanced one, it zooms in, which maybe we should have done sooner, but it's okay. So maintenance up here, animal health is still adjacent to equestrian, which is very important to that overall facility and program. Vet access to the horses and other animals, and then water resource occupying the space down here. When we went to an east option, so this is east, meaning that the rail is aligned along this east edge of the BNSF, and you can advance one more time here. Again, we went through a lot of different iterations and looking at different placement of buildings and how do we keep things adjacent. And some things that we learned that Eric probably knew already, having gone through the master plan process, but was thinking about things like keeping the yards contiguous, right? Well, you can't split up the yards. So with the rail alignment to the east, we talked about this previously, I think, but you need to get back to the crossing at Race and Franklin. And so we end up with this space up along Race Court that isn't necessarily connected other than with this underpass that we've created to the rest of the space. And so we've created 20 acres, of contiguous yards here. This would be then more of that storage and maintenance space, which the folks at Stock Show are extremely excited about. There's space for tie-outs, for storage, all sorts of other things that occur up there. This is in fact the reuse of an existing building, if we were able to go this route. Then you can see the facilities actually, rather than being this big, long, kind of contiguous front of buildings along the BNSF, we now have livestock complex where pretty much where it is located and also alternatives, including the master plan. And then the equestrian facilities, instead of being located here, have moved over towards the river. A couple of exciting opportunities around that. One, those equestrian facilities are expected to be programmed 40 to 50 weeks out of the year, very actively programmed. There will be resident horses associated with CSU's animal health facility, as well as the mounted patrol for the Denver police. So those are actually the only resident animals on site. And so getting those more adjacent to Betty Cram, to the riverfront, was an exciting opportunity. Also creating then, or removing the necessity for a permanent fence between the larger portion of the site and the riverfront, we thought was pretty fun. Another aspect that, if you notice in the other options, and you can see it in what you have in front of you, in both where the rail and the road are over on the west side, the internal circulation is really meant to be more kind of access and functional, kind of operational space. But what we've done in this is actually pulling streets into the middle of the overall site. And so 51st comes across, and instead of terminating where it had in the other options at National Western Drive, it actually comes into the site, would connect to this multifunction space, event space, and then National Western Drive becomes a festival street. It could host different events like farmers markets throughout the year, likely close during Stock Show, and it could create this great pedestrian promenade through the site. And then intersecting at Betty Cram, where again, what we tried to optimize in those other options, I think really starts to sing in this east option, whereby CSU in phase 1 and 2 is co-located with themselves, with the Water Resource Center and the Animal Health Facility. And then, assuming a funding does occur for later phases, the CSU Center would be right here. So they end up with a pretty nice concentration here around a really fabulous structure in the Exchange Building. Maintenance, again, is moved to the north, so we don't have that access issue across Betty Cram. And then we also only require one pedestrian crossing, like up and over, whereas in the other options you'll notice there were two, where we had to get up and over the BNSF, and then because of the separation up and over the Rock Island Railroad. So I think we've really tried to optimize both. We've been working with the partners diligently, the equity partners in particular, the city, Stock Show, and CSU, to make both of these work really well, and we're excited about the opportunities related to both. And so if you want to hit the next. Oh yeah, please.
So and I didn't mention this earlier. In all of the alternatives, in the master plan, we had a parking garage at the Denver Public Schools site. Okay, to help with the site planning and get people into the site. In all of the options, we have a parking structure, one-level parking structure under a portion of the yards. So that 1,000 cars that we were going to have here is now in the yards. And then in this option, it's down on this side. So the baseline and the west have it under here. So we think that's a good benefit because it puts cars where people want to be next to all these big event venues rather than running everyone up and down right.
How is that parking accessed?
Well, on this one, it would have to be accessed off of Betty Cram Drive. All right. And the other one.
It'd be up along Franklin.
Sorry. There you go.
Likely off of Franklin here. But
Franklin and National Street Drive.
Access here as well.
Okay. All right.
The other thing that I would just point out, there's a lot of tweaks and things that we've done for the via the different partners. But you can go back one really fast. One of the things that is also attractive about this is it creates a little bit more of a, without sort of negating or eliminating that opportunity to see what's happening behind the scenes, it creates a little more of a public face to the facility, whereby all the arenas are down sort of to the south, and so you have that public access is really readily available along the festival street. And then we have things where you have a lot of loading and access further north on the site. So it begins to concentrate a lot of the activity for the community, the public face to the south. Yeah.
Just real quick, it's showing what looks like a green space along the river on the other side of the equestrian.
Yeah.
So you're able to maintain that access?
Yeah, in both, all options have the riverfront access. In this case, admittedly, there's buildings along the river. And in the other options, there's a fence road along the river. But yeah, there's a large riverfront open space here that we would be programming.
So in this case versus the other case, there isn't that fence.
Correct.
So you have, it feels like more direct access to the river in this case.
Yeah, and during Stock Show, so those 2 weeks out of the year, there would be temporary fencing put up just for control of the site and ticketing and all that sort of thing. But the rest of the year, yeah, that would be totally permeable. We like the idea, again, because this would be such an active space with equestrian events and things, that you'd have roll-up doors along the barn edge, and we really think about 2 kind of front doors, right? So it's a really great public sort of view here. This could be an event space. It's a smaller equestrian arena. Event space, again, with roll-up doors. There could be you could almost think like a front porch, type of overhang coming off of some of the buildings.
Hold on, we got one question here and then I'll...
I have a question regarding the river and the green space along the river.
Yes.
How are you coordinating what's going on there with laying the river back? What's happening to the sewer lines that are out there right along the river bank? But more importantly, how does that coordinate with the Corps of Engineers study and the 100-year flooding of that onto this side and onto our Global on the other side? You start laying the banks down, then you're going to have more of a flooding problem, so you mean.
Do you want to respond, Judge?
Yes, I would like to. So that is a good question because we are working really closely with the Urban Waterways Project and the Department of Public Works at the city, who's the lead on the ultimate request for funding to the Army Corps of Engineers to address this stretch of the river and 2 additional waterways in Denver at Weir Gulch and at Harvard Gulch. And what we there's also, Tim, this would be a good presentation. There's a whole presentation that the Public Works team and NWC-CAC have been working on about how water flows in this part of Denver and really looking at what's happening in Globeville and where the water is coming from. And I think that's one that we should bring here. So, but without getting into that, because that's about a 20-minute
We have a
presentation.
meeting with them next Tuesday.
Great.
So hopefully they'll have some of that presentation.
Earlier tonight I talked about, and it's in the list of things I gave you for 2018, what we're going to do with the North Denver drainage and flood project. It includes the presentation that she's talked about, that we're taking to the whole community, that helps us build to the time when we're going to get the actual study from the Corps of Engineers and where that's going to happen. So it all is contiguous. It's to educate everybody on where we're at, what we got, and then the Corps of Engineers study will come.
That includes
So-
all of this new discharge from the big ditch in the water quantity.
So hold on, let me finish the National Western Center specific questions. So what, all of the work we're doing on the site, and we've been working with the drainage engineers, does no harm to the level of the water, no rise condition to the river. That's one of the things that we are very focused on. But by coordinating with the Corps, and we're in the middle of that process, if we can establish a western boundary for the campus against the river that allows the core project work to happen alongside us as a separate project, but still honors the uses that the partners have in the framework agreement, what is that new boundary, and how can we create an opportunity to do better for the river and better for Globe? So we do no harm automatic. I mean, that is a condition of our construction. But how can we partner? And I've talked to Jeff Shoemaker about this a lot at the Greenway Foundation. What could this program do? Still get all of the programmed uses and what the partners need to accomplish, but where can they have a goal of water conveyance, habitat, and recreation? They're very similar to some of the goals that we've laid out in our master plan and our baseline. So how do we coordinate? So we're working on that. One of the big questions for us is we don't have a final answer on rail until we go to the Surface Transportation Board. And rail and the Delgany are really fundamental to being able to accomplish our goals along the river. So we've told the Corps that we would try to accelerate through that and get them an answer by the middle of next year. But it's at the top of our mind about how do we be a good river neighbor. Yeah.
John?
That was my question.
Okay.
There's no preferred, there's no preferred option here, right?
No.
You just don't have contact.
No. Yeah, so we've gone through all these iterations. Right now there's a baseline, and that's what we built unless everything's evaluated and basically the baseline, the partners would agree to adjust the baseline. So we're in and we have some next step slides, and I won't hit everything on there, but so a big thing is that phasing of that timeline and the schedule as well as the costing. So we're going through that for those two alternatives to the baseline, so that basically all the information is available to you all, and importantly the equity partners in discussing if there should be any adjustment to the baseline.
I just have a question about the recently passed, I don't know what it's called, the green roof thing. How does that affect this plan? If it does, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other thing I wanted to ask is, would it be possible, because I've heard several times this evening, well, I don't remember what the master plan, I mean, most all the people sitting in this room took part in that, but it's been a while. Could we have a copy of that here?
Sure.
And just, I mean, because I've heard that, I don't know how many times tonight.
It's on our website, but yes, we will get one. You
Yeah,
want a physical
well,
copy at this meeting? Got it, that's easy. We will bring it.
That's perfect, thanks.
So to answer, the Initiative 300 was passed by Denver voters in this last election. And we don't know yet what the impact is because there is the implementation of that happens through City Council. And they're going to help us understand what it looks like with regard to not just our program, but all the rest of the large construction projects in Denver. So at this point, what we are doing is proceeding, and as we know what City Council does, then we will respond to implement whatever it is. But at this point, I think it would be premature until we understand exactly how it fits on our site and what we do with it.
Yeah. I was in a meeting this afternoon in the mayor's office about this, and the city, the administration, there's some legal implications here, and severe legal implications, and depending on how it goes. So some of us were briefed as to what is moving forward from the administration. So basically, if you're all familiar with the Energize Denver process, they've already sent something to City Council to say we're going to create a process like that. Because right now, quite candidly, the biggest issue passing, and they have actually met with the proponents, and the proponents do admit that there are fatal flaws in their issues. And that there are some problems with their initiative that was passed and that will need to be amended. I think what we ought to do is not next meeting, because it seems like we have a jam and penga, but when we have more information from in January, we'll have both Councilman Brooks, who is putting together a committee process, and whoever the responding person is from the city to tell you. But yes, it does have implications.
And Maria, there will be a public involvement in that.
Yes.
Why you modify that? Because
Well, first of all, you can't modify anything for 6 months per the initiative. No changes can be made for 6 months because of the way the initiative is written. What I think Councilman Brooks and the mayor's office, what we were briefed on this afternoon, is taking their time to do a significant stakeholder process, okay, to go through this. But we will, when we get closer to that and they get it more defined, maybe in the January meeting, we'll have them come and give us a presentation.
And, you know, we set the baseline and we're already talking about potential alternatives that need to be costed and scheduled. And this will be one of the things that comes forward, and as we continue, I mean, there will be changes, not just from voter initiatives, but from other things we know. And you'll see us come back to you over and over again. That'd be a scope change, a budget change, and a schedule change. And we bring all that together once we know more.
Can I just add to Jay, the green roof, I mean, really one of the potentials is for public space. And so you actually have a lot of roof there. So it's just part of yours.
Gotta go talk to Denver Water. It's got serious concerns. Denver Water.
At what point are you going to talk about the integration of this plan with the rest of the community? I mean, we're looking at it pretty much within its boundaries, but not how it connects. And I think it's critical in terms of the whole concept of what the master plan talked about. I mean, my concern is that we really have they're treating the National Western totally separate from the neighborhood. I think there is...
That is certainly not our intent, Vicki. In this discussion, yes, because we are focused on this internal piece. But Jay can answer this too. So we are not simply focused on this.
Okay.
We have to get the buildings right, and then we look and see how all that works, and how do we tweak that to tie into the neighborhoods.
So when we started this process 2012, and by 2014 we came up with a list of integrating the park and the neighborhood, and we did this list. And I think it's important that, I don't know whether you have the list, but I think it's important that people on this committee look at the list and decide which things they want to make sure are going to be included, and we have that discussion.
And which list is that, Vicki, just so
This is...
Oh, yeah, okay, yes. Yep.
So I will give it to you, Gretchen, and I hope you put it on the web so people can look at it and determine which things they would like to include.
So I will, can Liz put it up
Yeah,
so
we'll
all
put
the
it up.
CAC members
Yeah,
can have it?
we'll put it up.
But then Eric, can we distribute this to the placemaking team to make sure they have it? Okay.
And that's actually a great segue, and I'm not trying to squash any additional comments, but just I'll round up the presentation. I have this slide and one more. So we are, as Eric said, with those with the baseline even, but especially with the alternatives, we need to have the full story. And as Mickey said, a piece of that, a large piece, is around the circulation and parking, more importantly, community use, thinking about the activation, the access to the riverfront. And so we're now using those site plans that we just showed you, and we're calling them overlays. In some cases, they literally are. We're sort of drawing the paths or identifying the public spaces, but it's a deeper dive into all these different topics. So really importantly is that community integration and connection. And then one more slide here. So our next steps, that detailed operation circulation for equestrian livestock facilities. So we're making sure again that now we've kind of figured out that generally the relationships work, but are the individual buildings working really well. Exploring alternatives for development south of Betty Cream Drive. Largely that's impacting CSU currently in those different alternatives. But we're thinking about adaptive reuse of historic buildings, and are we allowing for great access to those? Are we setting those up for success? And then we'll be presenting draft refinements to SteerCom and back to you all as well on December 14th. So we're really looking forward to bring all those other overlays and considerations to you.
So are we going to have access to those draft plans?
Not till Tuesday.
Okay.
I'll give them till Wednesday.
Because then we can send you comments.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just have a train question coming from Fort Collins. Right down the middle, what's the frequency of the trains? What are the lengths of the trains? How does that impact how you're thinking about that placement?
So the Denver Rock Island is a short line railroad. They run maybe 6 trains a day through here, okay? I mean, the bigger issue from the train side, which we really don't have any control over, is the 100 trains a day on the Burlington Northern, all right? So the DRIR is a pretty small railroad compared to that. So they will move anywhere from 1 to 80 cars at a time. And it just depends how they get their cars delivered from Burlington Northern and what they're delivering back to Burlington Northern. And the other component here is the Denver Rock Island is a very important railroad. They've got 25 miles of rail north of here and a number of big customers. This is their only connection to the Burlington Northern. So everyone asks, well, can't we just get the railroad out of there? No, we cannot. This is the only way they connect. So we have to make room for them, and we're trying to look at all the options. They're working with us. We're talking to them a couple times a week. So it's not that they're shutting us out. We're just, again, it's a long process to get this to work. They're here. Yes.
They're consistent in all alternatives.
Yes.
But there's no at-grade crossing.
Well, yes, there are. There are 2. Now, let me. So in this west alignment, okay, all the alignments have an at-grade crossing at Race Court. Okay, that's existing today and does not change. All right. In this alignment, we would have an at-grade crossing at Betty Cram Drive. All right, and then there will always, in all the alignments, be an at-grade crossing where we connect to McDonald Farms. That the business stays in place. Okay. Right here. This is and that's one of the things we're looking at is access to that. Yep.
Right.
All right. And then in the other option, the only at-grade crossings we have are at Race Court and then also down here at McDonald Farms.
You have other ideas?
Yeah.
Throw 'em
Yeah.
out.
We're
We're out of ideas.
they're flexible to a point.
So I just have a question. There was some conversation about a demonstration urban farm as part of the whole especially incubating, things like that, incubating businesses. Does this show in this footprint?
No, not
Where
yet.
would that be? Is that too much detail?
We are developing all the programming for the site with the client, with the partners right now. So will there be an urban farm? Yes. Where it's going to go, that is not in the sites just yet. And we're working closely with CSU because both CSU and Denver Water have interest in how we program and what happens in all these public spaces. So
you're okay. So that partly answers my question, which really does need to be drawn out a little bit so we understand what's going on. So you're saying
that's part of the public realm. That's part of the next task order.
All right. So good. And that's one of the reasons I think this master plan suggestion is really good, because those are the details we can draw back in.
Yep.
Then I just had a question about I guess it would be an overlay question. When you start talking design, I may be misunderstanding that technically, but you said, this is an amazingly fast timeline to me, what you outlined to get, what you're getting through 2018. So I'm wondering about the input loop when you're talking about design, because you said there was, and I'm sorry, I just don't have the sophistication to identify it, but you said on the timeline, you reached design. And so that sounds like a lot of stuff that really becomes the charisma and
we're going to be
feeling.
designing like crazy in 2018.
Okay, so is this like when you have design
I'll explain it.
design standards like that?
Thanks.
Yeah, so the first thing we have to do is set a baseline, okay? We have to know what we're building, all right? Then the next, well, we have a baseline. Yeah, sorry.
Are we keeping the baseline or are we?
Yes. So anyway, we have the baseline, all right? We know what we're building. The next piece is then we have to bid out the design components for that. So all the horizontal stuff, all the architecture, all the plaza spaces, all those pieces will be designed over the next 2 years.
So what I'm asking is design standards, which I feel.
Okay, design standards and guidelines, yep, okay.
And we, in the neighborhoods, this is part of
Yep.
the conversation pattern. So where does that come in? You know,
We will
I'm not interested in engineering.
Okay, fair enough.
The design.
That's fine.
She's confusing when we
I
talk
get
about
it.
design of infrastructure and design of hooks.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so that work will probably start in April or May of this year, and Jay's team is doing that work.
And where's the public process? Where do we loop in? I don't know.
You will be looped in at every meeting.
It's a light touch on it, but the survey is the first kind of initiation of that. We're going to be doing community meetings. We're going to be doing community meetings. We're going to be doing intercepts. Julie has outlined a pretty robust and aggressive outreach plan, actually. So task order 3, which, as Eric pointed out, that's the public realm, thinking more specifically about the spaces and community spaces, gardens, all of the public art opportunities.
Programming pieces of those spaces.
So all of those will have a very heavy community engagement component as well as the design guidelines. So basically all of next year. You guys haven't seen us out in the community that much yet, but all of next year we're going to be out regularly getting input on all of these different pieces.
This group every month.
Okay, other questions? AE, did that answer your question?
We can share the outreach plan with you.
I mean, when you're talking about design right now, we're primarily talking design of infrastructure. That's the
Correct.
RFP that's out, and that you guys are doing. It's really your infrastructure.
We're doing the
In other words, how big are the pipes, and how big is that? That's what you're doing now, not right. So that's when they talk design now. That's design focus right now.
Because the public realm is loaded with public space design.
Right. But I'm talking about when we're talking about it right now.
Right. What's happening right now is only infrastructure. And we're showing you everything else that we're working on there.
So I think it's fair to say, and I'll have Gretchen or Eric chime in here, that this is important because decisions have to be made on the site plan in order for the city to move forward with their big IC contract for horizontal construction.
What's IC? Oh,
Integrated contract. So I'll let turn over to Gretchen.
So this is a timing and process question, right? Sorry that I stepped out. The horizontal integrated construction contract is the one that we'll have an RFP for on December 18th that I mentioned at the beginning. So I have to give Jay's team credit. So what has happened with placemaking? When Eric outlined the 4 components of placemaking, doing these site alternatives was not part of it. We had a master plan that was adopted by City Council that everyone had a lot of input into, and we have a baseline that reflects that, and a cost, and a scope, and a schedule, and it all goes together. What we were asked by our partners, and this is just the city, who's sort of the honest broker in the middle of this between the partners that will program buildings. The city's not going to program uses on this. This isn't our programming site. They said, hey, can you look one last time at where these buildings are? Because once we get to release that horizontal work and we cite those roads and utilities, that's it. We're just moving forward. And what Jay did and his team is they have, in the last month, done all of this. This has just been the fastest work I've seen, and what you're seeing literally happen from the last CAC meeting to the CAC meeting, and they meet every day on it. And a lot of the driver of this was what he mentioned. It's the CSU team that they, the being on the north end of the site is a longer-term land use transition of uses to create a sort of north end campus for them. They had a desire to come closer to their phases 3 and 8 CSU Center, and what would that look like? And if we weren't going to look at it now, we were never going to get a chance to look at it. So Jay and his team have whipped these up. They haven't been costed. There's no schedule attached to these drawings that say east and west. And what we did was, as soon as we got them, and I didn't even realize until this morning when I talked to Eric that we were ready, that he'd had the drawings ready to bring to today. And we said, yeah, bring them. We have them today. Bring them right now, because the timeline is so short to be able to have this additional task added to it, that we're bringing them to you now. We'll bring them to you December 14th. It's real time with the rest of the decision making that's happening. So having them for you to look at in detail on Tuesday and having comments on them. I'll tell you what I think will happen is that there will be a change to schedule and a change to cost that will happen with these alternatives. And right now there isn't a way to bring additional dollars to this. But if you don't do the creative placemaking work up front, you miss your chance forever. So that's what this exercise is, and that's why it's really been added to their workload. And Jay, I bet you and Angie are exhausted and your team by doing this, but we really appreciate it and really appreciate you all running through them with us. It's been this extra time at CAC tonight. We lost most of our audience, but it's really important to take a look at them. Yeah, so that's kind of the process place that we're at. If these fatal flaw out because of cost, because of schedule, we have a great baseline and an amazing campus to deliver that's consistent with our master plan. So there isn't a lot of risk here, and this is the right time to be creative if we wanted to. So. Anything else, Mickey?
Questions?
No, we're done on the slides. So.
You were pondering something, so I'm just calling on you ahead of time.
I appreciate all of the detail. This is more detail than I've ever seen at a meeting here in terms of knowing the plan and where we're going and all. I just want to be sure that we don't lose the real vision of we talk about details and programs and all of that, but there's a bigger concept that we need to make sure we don't lose sight of as we develop the specifics. So I just want to read quickly from something that we wrote, actually I wrote for the master plan, and it said the National Western Plan must proclaim loud and clear that Denver and the state of Colorado, through the National Western, reject those exploitive aspects of the West and promote a new Western culture with new values. These values extend beyond respecting the rights and dignity of people and all forms of life and the natural environment. It will provide knowledge, innovation, compassion, and new insights into the human condition. It means global collaboration and multiple education, scientific, communal government, etc. entities. So we get really into these details, and I think that what we're doing really can have a major worldwide impact. And as I listen to what's happening in Rhino and this whole gentrification kind of thing, gentrification is generally taken as displacement of people. That's the current definition. There's an opportunity to make an additive process in terms of what we're doing for people, and that's why I think it's so important that we include not just the National Western, but the whole community, Elyria, Swansea, Globeville, to make sure that when people look at what's happening here and when you go for funding, they're not saying it's just another stock show. It really is a change in the paradigm, and that we're adding to people's lives and not subtracting. And I think with all this discussion of gentrification, which is, people losing things, this is the opportunity. And there was just a lot going on tonight, which was really quite additive, and I think that we can contribute to things like providing better housing. I heard that tonight. I heard Tim talk about fixing up housing, and I think there are other things. But if we look at it in the broader sense of what we can do for this community, I think that we can all be really proud of creating more than just a stock show or just the National Western.
And
I have a request when you send us those site plans, because, there were some bullet points on there, but there were also a lot of comments. And I know that, Jay, when you did these site plans, you were thinking about connections to the neighborhood and how maybe if you move the CSU, facilities down on Betty Frank Drive, that would make it easier for the community to access. I don't know if those notes were on there, and I think it would inform this group more into your thinking as to why you changed the site plan and all the different benefits that can be derived from those changes. It'd be wonderful if you could at least throw some of those bullet points thinking.
We're ready to post this presentation though, right?
Yeah, but she's saying those bullet points aren't
Those
on
bullet
that.
points are on there, okay.
Yeah, I'm asking for some of the comments.
Comments.
So the
We have the
overlays
tape.
that we're working on to bring back to you in the 14th, we'll do that I think in detail, but we can absolutely include some bullets to point what are the trade-offs, the pros and cons with each of the alternatives.
Yeah, just because, you think about them naturally, but others won't naturally think.
Any other comments, questions, thoughts?
Just one quick, on 48, we switched from 49 to 48. We don't, not now, but can you elaborate on those trade-offs too? I realize you meant, you don't have to do it now, you can put it on.
Sure, yeah, basically, we don't own any land up here. This is a large viable business. If the city owns right-of-way here at 48th, it makes a lot of sense to maintain that city right-of-way and realign this so that we don't have to deteriorate the neighborhood further and take more businesses.
Which I think is a great thing, and I just want, this is another check back to the master plan. Is there any trade-off we're not aware of?
It
may not be, it's just a.
Yeah, other than what I just said, that's really the main reason.
Well, there are opportunities along 48 that maybe not.
Okay, I got two things. What do you say then?
Yeah.
Are there opportunities on 48 west of the river that, maybe present something the site, the neighborhood? I don't know what's along 48.
I mean, we can talk about that when we do the overlay, but the whole neighborhood plan calls for redevelopment all along.
Right, yeah, I didn't really want to get it, I was just
yeah.
posing it because it's, I didn't really want to take the time. I just wanted to resolve those together.
Okay, anything else on the site plan?
You're going to see this again on December 14th.
You'll see it again on December 14th. So you have more time to reclaim your time on it. Okay. Is that it? Okay, is there any public comment?
Okay.
Going once, going.
You identify yourself.
Yeah, just tell us.
So I'm a resident of Denver, but I have a question for you. My son participated with Western Air, so a couple of times they came out here to do their annual presentation for the stock show. And what's not clear to me on your site plan is, for example, it just seemed like a wall of buildings. And I don't know, I didn't see any kind of like green space around it for where the stock show events actually take place, and there are horses outside. Where will that space be?
So we'll be addressing that in the overlays, not just where horses would be, but use of other open spaces. Right now, admittedly, it's the little bit of color is a key so that we know who's programming each space. We're not showing all the green space really outside of the riverfront at this point. But as far as the resident horses, in the baseline in the west option, those would be up along Race Court at Race and BNSF. In the east alignment alternative, that would actually happen down at Betty Cram and along the riverfront.
Okay, well, thank you. And finally, just to I really appreciate the comments that this gentleman made over here. And along those lines, to piggyback on what you were saying, hopefully the aesthetic style of the buildings will reflect Colorado and the history of the West, and not just be a lot of the metal siding that we've been seeing lately, but just make it be something that really reflects who we are as a state. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. One of the things that we have not talked about is really the choreography of the site. I mean, one of the worst things about the National Western as it exists, if you want to go through the various events and you have a limited amount of time, it's difficult to know where to go, how long it takes. I think that we need to spend some time to make sure that going from one place to the other is clear and not too excessive in terms of getting there.
Yeah, so one of those overlays is going to be stock show, which is obviously our biggest event. Thinking about how they're accessing the site, how are they getting around the site, what are those walking distances, to your point, what's that experience? Also thinking about other events. Is there a small event? Are there 3 medium-sized events on the site? And then also non-event days. While yes, we hope this is heavily programmed, there are going to be times when there's no big event going on. And so what's the experience for the 365-day-a-year user? Community members, employees at CSU, at Stock Show, and other peripheral users.
And for this year at the National Western Stock Show, it starts in less than 40 days. We're experimenting with wayfinding with flat Terrence life-size things that speak to you and tell you where to go. Just kidding. Pictures. Yeah, 3D printing of me on my horse. Yeah, just kidding. It's not going to happen. Anyway, if anybody has anything else, too bad, we're done. Have a good night.